Tales of Wells Fargo, starring Dale Robertson, usually seen at this time, will not be seen tonight so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Kingdom Come is 4 separate issues, 48 pages apiece. It was an all-immersive kind of lifestyle for me.
It blew people away. I mean, this was the most sought-after book there was.
This was something very new, very different.
No one had seen anything like that at that scale before.
It was amazing.
I never thought from anything that people would still be talking about this book 25 years later.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Become a patron today. Patreon.com/wordballoon. For as little as $3 a month, you can really help Word Balloon keep going and get exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Here's what you get. The Word Balloon Magazine, a digital publication packed with behind-the-scenes interviews, commentary, and insights from your favorite comic book creators, writers, and pop culture stars. And you can join the Word Balloon Book Club. Join Brian Bendis and me for a live monthly discussion of a hand-picked graphic novel. It's a great way to dig deeper into storytelling, art, and comic book history. Word Balloon has been a home for creator conversations since 2005. Your support helps cover production costs and keeps these interviews going strong. So if you love comics, creators, and long-form conversations, become a patron today. Be one of the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Patreon.com/wordballoon.
Welcome back to Word Balloon, where we're excited today that Jeff Loeb, former head of Marvel Television and one of our favorite guests here on Word Balloon. Word Balloon, of course, is a stinky production, which will be available to you on whatever station you want. You just turn it on and there it is. The Word Balloon is your balloon and the news of tomorrow. And now, here's John.
Well, thank you, Jeff Loeb. It's a pleasure to see you, and welcome back to a new Loeb Report. Dude, that always kills me, and thank God for you remembering all that nonsense. You know, we've been doing this for almost 20 years, not to age us.
Well, I think you've been doing it for 20 years. I have just been, at this point, it's just an AI that you're talking to, so it doesn't really matter. How are you doing, little chatbot? There we go.
Yeah, I'm doing good, buddy. Yeah, you're starting off a big week for me. I'm talking to Juergens tomorrow and Alex Ross on Tuesday.
There you go. They're just giving them away.
No, man. You know, every now and then, the stars align, and you're all available around the same time, and it's like that's fantastic. It's only good for the viewers and the listeners. So, fantastic, man. Well, congratulations. You've got 2 active books happening right now with Batman. Let's talk about Hush 2. You and Jim Lee back. And, and really in general, Jeff, before we get into the specifics of Hush, this is a continuation of Hush. We also have Last Halloween, which is a continuation of Long Halloween and Dark Victory. Why, what inspired you to come back to these stories?
Both were weird coincidences. I can't explain it any other way. Tim and I had for a long time talked about doing it. In fact, I had written the first 2 issues, which he had not yet started drawing. And then tragically, he passed away. And at that point, I called DC and said, look, I appreciate you guys hanging in, but I'm just going to put this in a drawer. There's, without Timmy, there's no real reason to do it. And about a year went by, and I was talking to Richard Starkings, our incredible letterer and designer, and with Mark Chiarello, who was the editor on Dark Victory and the editor on Catwoman in Rome, and had worked with Archie very closely, Archie Goodwin, our original editor, and who was a dear friend of Timmy's, and an exceptional artist and storyteller and human being. And it was really Mark who said, maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Maybe the way we ought to look at it is not as who could we get to replace Tim, because that was not something that I had any interest in. I didn't want the reader to go, well, it's a good story, but it's not Tim. And I'm not, crazy about Joe Dombrowski's work, taking nothing away from Joe. He's an extraordinary illustrator. But it wasn't that way. I mean, and certainly the person who would be the closest to fill that spot would have been Mark. But it didn't feel right. And so what Mark said was, maybe we should think about this as a tribute to Tim. And he put in my mind an image which I still have, which is, why don't you think about this as wherever Timmy is, he's on the front porch of the Kent's farm in Smallville, and he's got the collected edition open in his lap. He's sitting in a rocking chair, and he's just smiling because every single one of the chapters is by an artist that he loved.
Wow.
And so I said, I think I can do that. And so I went to DC and I said, look, this is the pitch. And I think they thought that I was going to go to my go-to guys, that I would go to Jim Lee and Arthur Adams and to Ed McGuinness, the stars that I've been lucky enough to work with, but had nothing to do with Timmy at all. And so I had to explain that wasn't the plan, and that it was much more likely to be like Eduardo Rizzo and Klaus Janson and Mark Chiarello and Bill Sienkiewicz and Cliff Chang, and so I started and so I sent them a list and said, these are the 10 people that we would go after. And they called back and they said, okay, you're not going to get all of these 10 people. Well, some of these people have regular jobs. Like they can't stop and do your issue. And I said, well, first of all, we don't have to come out on any kind of schedule. Like when it's done, we'll come out. And second of all, why don't you let me ask? And they said, well, are you open to the idea of saying, let's say you only get 3 of them. Could you split it up into thirds? And I said, no, again, that just sort of defeats the purpose of what it is. Look, we're talking about a problem we don't have. So let me go talk to these 10 artists and see what happens. And I can say it's a testimony to Tim that and by the way, I should point out, I didn't know any of these people. I'd met Klaus, obviously I knew Chiarello, and a few of them I'd met, but I hadn't worked with any of them. And every single person that I called, because they were friends with Tim, it had nothing to do with me, I would get as far as, I'm thinking about doing this tribute to Tim, and they would go, I'm in.
Awesome.
And I would go, do you want to even talk about like what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about? No, I don't care. Just how many pages and what does it do? And then when I said, look, it's going to be a true sequel to Long Halloween, they were like, wow, we're doing that? I was like, yeah. They were like, we're in. And so I went back to DC. I said, I have all 10. And literally the next day, they called and said, you're greenlit. Ariana Totoro was our editor, and at the very beginning we talked about it. I said, "Look, you're going to be juggling cats and chainsaws. Like I don't know how to put out a book with somebody I've never worked with. I don't know how to put out a book, 10 books with 10 different artists with 10 different styles." We were lucky that Richard Starkings does all of the lettering and designing, so there is a continuity there. And we were extremely lucky that Dave Stewart, who's just an exceptional colorist, had worked on When in Rome and had worked with Timmy before and understood his palette. And so it was never an issue there as to whether or not each issue was going to, when it looks all together, yes, there will be different artists along the way and maybe feel a little bit like an anthology, but there are stories that are continued into next issues. And I didn't want anything to feel like it was a fill-in or something like that. And certainly, Bill Sienkiewicz and Eduardo Rizzo don't have similar styles, but they were people that Tim really admired. And so in the welcome letter, it was very important that I write to everybody that said, "Look, I'm not asking you to draw like Tim. That would be exactly what we don't want. What we do want you to do is to use Tim's costumes." Tim draws Batman with longer ears than most people do. The cape is a living thing. It can be down to his knees, or it can be literally on the floor around the room without any explanation as to how that happens. And then, as I said, I use a lot of ink. Tim always believed that the page came alive with the ink. It didn't, the pencil was not what did it. And not everybody thinks like that. Not everybody works like that. But I urge them to go in that direction. And yet, I think the issues that are my favorites are the ones that actually look the most like what Tim enjoyed about their work and their storytelling. And so that I am hoping, I think the collection comes out either at the end of the year or at the beginning of next year, that Tim will be sitting on that front porch of the Kent farm and enjoying it. And it is, I never say never, but it is the end of the saga of the Corleone family. And it answers, I think, as many questions as we could answer. There's still some things that I believe that, are there and as a storyteller that the reader can enjoy. And it's been a blast. It's been extraordinary. And I've made 10 new friends, which was the sort of the greatest gift that Tim could have left me. And I know somewhere he's laughing hysterically at the fact that, we've all been running around like crazy people trying to get this done. But a lot of that fell to Ariana, and she deserves just bags and bags of credit. So it's amazing. In the case of Hush, we always had planned on doing a sequel, and people knew when they saw the 20th anniversary hardcover, which I think is the 15th version that they collected. It helps when your partner's the publisher. So, it also helps if the book sells. And we did a 5-page prologue, and that was to pick up about 2 weeks after what we now refer to as Hush One. It's just easier in our conversations just to call one thing Hush One and call the other thing Hush Two, so that everybody understands that. And I am sitting in an airport in, of all places, Pisa, Italy, and it's like the middle of the night, and I'm supposed to be flying to London or someplace. And this is a little over a year ago, and I look down, and it's Jim, and Jim and I are friends, but I couldn't imagine why he was calling me. And so I said, what's going on? And he said, we're ready to go. And I actually thought that he was in it because Jim goes to Italy quite a bit. So I thought he was in Italy and that he was basically saying we should go and we should meet somewhere in Italy and have dinner. That's where I thought the conversation was going. And so I said, okay, great. Where we're going? Where you want to meet? I'm happy to do so. I'm in Italy. Where are you in Italy? He said, I'm not in Italy. I'm in Los Angeles. We're going to start. And I said, I don't understand. We're going to start what? And again, I thought like having dinner, like getting together. What are you talking about? He said, no. I've just re-upped my contract. I had heard that he might be leaving. And he said, I've re-upped my contract. But part of it is that I really miss doing sequential storytelling and interior pages. And I want to do it with you, and I want to do the story that we've been talking about for close to 25 years. But it's important to me that the story takes place present day, because what I had originally pitched was that the story took place the next day, so I didn't have to deal with any of the modern continuity. And so I said, so when do you want to start? He said, as soon as you send in a script, we go. And I was like, okay. And when is this gonna appear? He said, well, that's another thing is that we're going to do 6 issues. We're going to finish out this volume of Batman, and then I'm going to need a break because I can't do 12 in a row. So we're going to take a break in the middle, and then we'll do the last 6 issues as one piece. Where that's going to appear, that's not been decided yet. But we will not interfere with what Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez are doing. So that book will start with a volume 3, and what we're doing in our story will eventually meet up with it. But it will not meet up with it at the end of the first 6 issues. And that's going to cause some fanboy consternation. But at the end of the day, a lot of people that I've met have said, yes, I bought it. I'm not going to read it until they're all together. I'm waiting for the when it's all collected. And I said the same thing on the last Halloween when we were making the deal. I said, guys, look, whatever numbers are running, last Halloween, Dark Victory, Catwoman in Rome, even the original prequels, as they now call them, which were the Legends of the Dark Knight, Long Halloween, Halloween specials.
Yep.
Those were never big sellers. They were things that did well, and certainly caught the imagination of people. But it was when they were collected that they suddenly took off, and really became more graphic novels than they were singular issues. And I know a lot of people who, particularly when I sign at conventions, that bring me the collection and aren't even aware that at one point it came out, and it was 25 years ago. So it's like, these are a whole new group of readers who have said, I wanted it, to read a new Batman story, and they told me, you got to get Hush, you got to get Long Halloween. And I think they just went out, they go to Amazon and they buy the collected edition, and it never occurred to them that these were single issues that came out at some point. And the way that DC does their collections now, they strip out all of the numbers and they strip out the credits and they leave the titles, so they look like chapters.
Sure.
It doesn't look like, oh, here's this book and then this book and then this book. So that's how it started. And then, I have to give credit to DC. They really just threw everything at the marketing department, and it's not usual that they talk about numbers, but we sold over 400,000 copies of the first issue of Hush,
Fantastic.
and it really did what Jim wanted to do, which was that they had this incredibly successful launch of the Absolute, bless you, the Absolute uh, Batman and all of the world in the Absolute world. Um, but they had started this initiative called All In, and Jim really wanted people to be buying what we refer to as the regular books.
Certainly, the regular
Uh,
continuity. Absolutely.
and he just couldn't think of a better way of doing that than the two of us coming in and telling an original story, and then having the opportunity to tell an original story again next year. But it is, I'm not sure people understand this yet, but they will. It is one 12-part story. It's not six and then here's Hush 3 and that's another story. And we actually end on a cliffhanger. So it's going to
Ooh,
be kind of interesting because the people are then going to go, well, where's the rest of the story?
yeah.
And it's all prepared and we just need to know where it's going to land. Um,
So, as you said, the second six, will they be monthly or will they be out as a graphic novel,
no,
or
no, no, they'll be monthly. They'll be
they'll be
12.
monthly as well? Okay.
Yeah. So
But it's a question of scheduling, and obviously, and hey, like you said, I mean,
and
Jim.
that's the other thing. One of the thing is that we don't want to be in this situation again where Jim needs time. So but it will be in 26, and it probably, I would say around now would be a little on the early side, and I would say October would probably be on the late side because I don't think anyone wants to wait a year for the rest of the story.
Yeah,
So both, and in particular, neither do Jim and I.
sure.
Um, But they'll do something smart like reprint the first six so that if you didn't get it or you need a
Fresher.
recap, then that's fine. But seven will pick up exactly where six left off. We have to, because, like I said, it's going to end in a cliffhanger.
Understood. And also, obviously, the way that Long Halloween and your other great collections have survived our as collections. So, yeah, for that future person that picks it up complete, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. You want to
exactly.
keep the story going. I respect that.
Right.
Let's talk about the Hush story, and then I am going to go back to last Halloween. Um, Tommy Elliott and
Yeah.
the creation of Tommy Elliott. And I love that he is from Bruce's past and is a guy that knows Bruce Wayne intimately and obviously knows how to push his buttons. Tell me about the development and the creation of Tommy Elliott.
Uh, well, I think I've told the story before, but Paul Levitz was then the publisher, and he was the one who first uh, got into it as to what it was going to be. The story that I love is that Mike Chiarello, who was then the art director, he wasn't an editor, uh, called me and he said, "Listen, hey, I was talking to Jim Lee, and he was interested in going on Batman, but he was only interested in going on Batman if you were going to write it. So, are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, if Jim's really going to do it, like I don't know that Jim's done a monthly comic in a while, and so, but if he's going to do it, I'm in." And then he went to Jim, who at this point was living in San Diego, and he said, "Hey, I was talking to Jeff Loeb, and he was really interested in doing a Batman book, but only if you would draw it." And so Jim was like, "Well, I hadn't really thought about that, but if Jeff's really going to write it, and he has time for it, then yeah." So he then had coerced us both into working together, and then it went upstairs to Paul, and Paul called me and he said, "Look, don't you can do this, you can not do this, but we haven't really had a villain." Now, this is before Grant Morrison's work. Everybody has to remember this. Um, but we really haven't had a villain who has stuck the way since Ra's al Ghul. Um, and I can't even give you the dates on that, but that's somewhere in the 70s, I think.
Right.
And I mean, and that's still, this was 20 years ago, so it's still, you're now in the early 2000s. I think that's when we came out.
Yeah.
And so he was basically saying, look, in 25 years, we've had some great stories, but we don't have a new toy in the box. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to create something that's wholly yours, that will withstand the test of time. And I was like, are you insane? Like, you're asking me to, like, here, just come up with Doctor Doom. That's an easy thing. And the Green Goblin. Well, sure. Those things just fall out of the sky. And but Jim was up for it, and so we just decided this is the story. And now the funny part about it was we were working on this in secret because they didn't want anybody to know it. And so what we started doing was at the top of every page, you're supposed to put the name and the number of the book. And in those days, you literally had to turn in the artwork. You couldn't scan it and send in a digital copy and make sure that only 2 people got it. You sent it in a FedEx box, and whoever saw it saw it.
Sure.
And so all it said across the top was hush, because we were trying to say to people, if you're looking at this, don't say anything. And for the first couple of issues, if you read the first couple of issues, he has no name. And part of it was that he had the bandages on his face because, to tell you the truth, we hadn't yet sort of figured out what he was going to look like. And then Tommy shows up in the second issue as a grown man, and he looks, he's got red hair and he's a handsome guy, and but you didn't really know. And the funny part about it was, having done the holiday mystery, which was intended to be a mystery, it was Batman going, who is Holiday?
Sure.
This was a different story. When you read the story, it's Batman is aware that someone who he does not know is messing with his life. And at the same time, Tommy Elliott is in his life. And to me, it was like, come on, guys, like, you've been reading comics. Like, we just introduced the guy that's the guy. Like, it's not a mystery. We're not going to tell you that. And in fact, Hush never takes off the bandages in the entire story. And the only thing that we did, because it was fun, was just very early on, Jim and I had talked about Jason and the idea that, maybe there was a way that Jason came back to life, or maybe he wasn't always dead, or whatever the question was. And so I went back to Paul and said, what do you think? Should we change the game and bring Jason back? And he said, well, then you don't own the character, because that's a pre-existing character. That's not how it works. So if for some reason they make toys or movies or anything else like that, we own it. And so I was like, okay, that okay. And this was part of the conversation that lends itself towards the Red Hulk, because people say to me all the time, wow, you must have made a fortune. They made a movie, and Harrison Ford and their toys and Red Hulk hands. And I went, yeah, well, except that I didn't invent the Hulk, and I didn't invent Thunderbolt Ross. So from Marvel's point of view, he is just another apple on the tree that they own.
I'm hip.
And that's, whether that's fair or not, we can spend a lot of time on it. But at the end of the day, I don't know, when a character appears and he's got a completely different origin and he's doing completely different things, that seems like an original creation. But that's not how it's looked at. And so the in the case of Hush, we still thought, it'd be so much fun as a fake. Let's just do it. And when Jim drew that last page with Jason the same age as Dick, with a little white hair and that killer costume, I was like, wow, this is a really cool character. And so did everybody else. And so that started something that I had nothing to do with, which was they sat down with Judd Winnick and said, we want to bring Jason back. There seems to be a lot of interest in this. Figure out a way that he didn't die. So now come to the present day, and when Jim is on the phone with me and I'm in Pisa, Italy at the airport, he says to me, I want this story to be in current continuity. And I was like, okay, well, how hard can that be? Like, we'll just take some of the ideas that we had and we'll move them here. And what I found out was that Alfred was dead, which really threw a wrench in a lot of the story. And he doesn't live in Wayne Manor, and he's got another bat cave someplace else. And Commissioner Gordon is a beat cop, and Vandal Savage, of all people, is the police commissioner. And I'm sorry for everybody that feels otherwise, but a guy who is immortal, who has fought Superman and the entire Justice League, by the way,
by himself,
has a 9-to-5 job in Gotham City as the police commissioner. Everyone at DC is very aware of how I feel about this. And I said, okay, well, look, we're going to do this through continuity, through omission. That's what we're going to do. And I did the same thing on Superman for All Seasons. When, Carlin saw Mike Carlin, who was then the editor in the Superman group, and we were doing this not with him. We were doing it with Joey Cavalieri, who never gets enough credit. And Carlin read the first issue and he said, I don't understand. You've got Clark running around in Smallville and he's not playing football. And John Byrne has determined that he played football. And I said, well, you know what? I think Clark playing football is stupid. And I believe in the Dick Donner movie where Glenn Ford says, I don't know what it is that you're supposed to do here, but it's not play football.
Yep.
And so we had this huge go-round about it. And I said, look, I'm not going to say he didn't play football, but I'm not going to show you him playing football. And that sort of bought us a little time. And then finally, the other thing we had to cave on was that in a few panels, Clark is wearing a Letterman jacket. Why he's wearing a Letterman jacket, whose Letterman jacket that is, for all I know, it's Jonathan's Letterman jacket. Like, I just went, there you go. He's got a Letterman jacket, so that's clearly he's involved in sports in some way. And so it's the same thing. Like, when you see, because originally I had written that, we were in the cave, and I loved the fact that in the first Hush 1, Jim had redesigned the cave and had put a carousel of Batmobiles.
Mm. Yes,
the trophies, but the carousel of Batmobiles was super cool, and that was something that I'd wanted to do. And I got word from DC that said he doesn't have any of that stuff anymore. And I said, well, what has he got? And they said, well, he's probably got a computer. And I went, in the cave. And they said, yeah. And I said, okay. So when you go to that page, it says the cave. That's what it says. It doesn't say where the cave is or who the cave is, because hopefully this book is going to be published 5 years from now, 25 years from now, whatever it is. If we're lucky. And it's going to be published side by side with Hush 1. And so, look, I've told this story a million times. when I took over Superman, the monthly comic, I was handed a book, and this is not an insult to anybody that was working on the book. It's just as time goes by, when you're working on something, it's hard for you to keep telling the same story over and over again. I know I was on Superman for 3 years. I was on cable for 3 years. I was on X Force for 3 years. That's 36 issues, 36 stories, and it's very hard to do without killing part of your cast or doing something that is a significant change to what's going on. The trick is actually to tell a really good emotional story with what you have. And I've tried to lean into that, but that doesn't mean, because continuity is not my friend. And I used to say all the time as a joke, and boy, would I get in trouble, which is, look, as far as I'm concerned, Jimmy Olsen never became Robin, and everything else is up for grabs. And you will know, and I will state this for the record, that when I tell my Jimmy Olsen becomes Robin story, the unknown tale of Jimmy Olsen, when I tell that story, and Tom King, do not tell that story before I do, that that'll be the end. That will be my saying goodbye.
I'm done.
I will never tell another Superman, Batman comic story again. That's my end game. So, and that's not coming anytime soon.
Very good.
But nonetheless, there was a moment in Hush One where I needed Bruce to come up to the Daily Planet in order to have a conversation with Clark. And something I would never do now, but it was something that I did back then. When I was handed the Superman book, this is what I was handed. The Daily Planet had gone out of business. Lex Luthor had ruined them. Lois was a crime reporter for the Metropolitan Police Department. I don't think that job exists in real life. I don't even know what that means, to be a crime reporter. Clark was a novelist living at home. And Perry was in the hospital with a heart condition and probably was not going to live. And Jimmy was old enough now to be a fashion photographer and had all these hot models. And I said, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're bringing back the Daily Planet. We're bringing back, and actually the story is called We're Back. And they all return. Perry is the editor. Jimmy is miraculously now, I don't know, between 15 and 20 years old, and as a photographer. And Lois is back working at the Planet, and everybody's happy, and that's what it is. And because what I said is look, guys, here's the problem that I have. And again, this is not a slam on anybody that was working on the book before. They wanted to change. I was like, I'm not going to, it's not like I called and said, hey, this needs to be fixed. They called and said, do you want to come on board? And I said, if you can get Joe Kelly to do Action Comics, I'm on board. And then we were lucky. We got Joe Casey and Mark Schultz, and we had a lot of fun, 3 years. And I think we told some great stories. But I sort of felt like Superman is the perfect apple tree. Great apples, great shiny red apples. And as time went by, people were putting ornaments on it, whether it was that he had the mullet or whether he was Superman red and Superman blue or whether or not he didn't work at the Planet, any of those things. I mean, at one point, look, one of my heroes, Denny O'Neil, said he's no longer a reporter. He's a correspondent. He's Walter Cronkite. He's on the news.
Right.
Those were the comics I grew up with.
Me too. Yeah.
Kryptonite no more. He's sitting there eating kryptonite. Like, I'm not against you changing the rules. It's just like, if everybody keeps changing the rules, eventually you're so far away from where you are. What you have is a Christmas tree. You don't have an apple tree. So I just said, look, all I'm going to do is just take down all these ornaments. And lo and behold, just a lot of people said, wow, you really understand Superman. And I was like, no, I really don't. I just am telling the stories that you probably missed, because He's not blue. He doesn't have a mullet. He works at the planet. That's what it is. It's like you can't tell a Sherlock Holmes story that doesn't have Watson, and he lives in Philadelphia, and he doesn't speak with a British accent, and he doesn't want to smoke, and and his arch enemy is a woman who spurned his love, and okay, that's a great story. I'm not telling you it's not, but that's not Sherlock Holmes. So, coming full circle around to, the movie that just came out,
Yeah.
that is how James saw the character. Is that, he has a dog named Crypto, and he has a Fortress of Solitude with robots running around in it, and Lex Luthor is bald and evil and competitive and a billionaire, and I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening in that movie, but at the premiere, there was this, really passionate speech that James gave about how he wasn't interested in telling the story about how a baby in a rocket came and crash landed, and then he grows up and he's on the Kent farm, and then he from there goes and gets a job at he goes, the first Superman comic I ever picked up, he was fully formed. He was Superman, and nobody knew his secret identity, and he had friends that were superheroes, and he fought giant robots, and he fought a giant monster, and he had a dog with a cape, and he goes, and that's what I wanted to make, and that's what I admire the most about the film, is that it is like picking up a comic in the middle of a run. It was not a reinterpretation of the way that you might see Superman. It was, no, this is Superman. I'm going to make a Superman movie. And because there have been so many other versions, just like when I took over the book, and again, I don't think he was slamming any of those other versions. He doesn't make any snide remarks about it. He doesn't make any comments in the press about, well, they went off mark and I had to pull it back on track. I never, ever would say that. This is the Superman that I knew. This is the Superman that I wrote about in For All Seasons. If you know James as a filmmaker, he's a purist. And so that's what he did. And I think at a time when we are looking for hope, and when we do think that billionaires are villains and not, what you grew up and want to be, that the timing was exceptional in terms of making it work. And look, people are going and having fun, and I think that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And did he make some choices that, I'm eager to see whether or not, and this is spoiler alert, but I'm eager to see whether or not the message from his parents is actually the message from his parents. I am very suspicious of how they obtained it, and I am very suspicious of how they repaired it.
Sure.
And I'm very suspicious of how quickly everyone said, yeah, that's what it is, including Superman. Now, the emotion at the end of the movie, and again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, stop, skip ahead, do whatever you're supposed to do, edit me out, I don't care. But the fact that he embraces his Smallville parents as the person that made him Superman, that's right on for me. That is, you hit it. You understood it completely. And whether it's, the Kents, or whether it's Glenn Ford, who will always be in my head. I spent a lot of time on Smallville, and John Schneider was certainly in my head.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I don't know how we got lost on this junket, other than you asked me where the origin of Hush, and now we're talking about the Superman movie.
Yeah, but we're hitting everything that I want to talk to you about, and never apologize for the tangents, because that is kind of a hallmark of Word Balloon. But also mentioning
the hallmark of having a conversation with me.
Well, the Loeb Report, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely, it's extemporaneous conversation. I will dwell for a second on the message from Jor-El, because it, to me, had an echo of Smallville, that wonderful episode with Christopher Reeve when they decipher everything, and Clark comes back to Jonathan, and it's like, I, according to this, I'm supposed to conquer the world. I don't want to be that person. And that beautiful father-son moment, like, you're my son. That's not going to happen. And it's so great. And in a different way, we got a softer Jonathan in this current movie. But again, I really felt that moment in Smallville was in James's mind when he manipulated the message the way he did.
We'll see. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things about it was, and I thought that was the other thing that was quite daft, deft, deft,
deft, deft.
is that I think James laid a lot of track for not just for Superman, but for where the DCU is going and what it's
Yeah.
going to look like, and so I'm curious. But by the same token, I'm still very excited for Batman 2 coming out of Matt Reeves and knowing that that movie is going to be in the tone and the darkness of what Matt wants to tell about. It's not going to be a bright and shiny Batman. But then I guess James is also going to make another Batman movie. That should be interesting. And for those of you that are confused by how Matt Fraction can tell a Batman story while we still haven't finished Hush, well, look at the movies and then come back and tell me whether or not that makes sense to you. I just remember a time when I went to go see Star Wars, and then they told me that there was going to be a sequel, and I'd have to wait 3 years. The fact that you're not going to wait 3 years and this story is going to come out, it'll all be part of the Batman mythos. That's all I know.
I'm concerned because, and also I hope we have time for at least, one of our lengthy conversations because there are other things I want to cover. Given the fact that we do have more of Hush, I hope you will consider coming back, maybe like around, episode 6 or whatever, and we can
Sure,
get
that
more into
or
Hush.
when we come back on to be a good place to start when we say we're back.
True, but there are elements of Hush that I would like to
Okay.
explore. But again, we don't have to do it now because, and
I don't know how. Look, I'm not going anywhere right now.
attaboy.
You want to
All
keep
right,
going?
well, that's cool.
You can just keep asking.
Well, what I liked about already, first of all, the Riddler's involvement too in Hush, and I think that's great, especially where things ended in the first book. And now, again, especially the way things are at the last issue that I read, yeah, the Riddler has a more prominent role.
Well, again, I first of all anybody's read are 3 issues.
Right.
So that what I find exciting is that if you go back and read the first 3 issues of Hush One, you don't know anything. You don't know where the story's going. You don't know who's involved. You don't know anything. But by the end of the 6th issue, you have a very good idea as to what is happening along the way. And that's what we're going to find out.
Okay.
I think right now, I think 4 is going to surprise a lot of people in terms of the bend in the road. But the Riddler does play an important part. And I think what everybody is going to start to see is that if you've read Hush One, all of those villains came together because they were promised something by Hush. And he didn't make good on any of those promises. So there's a reason why he can't go back to the Poison Ivies and the Clayfaces and the Killer Crocs of the world.
Yeah.
Like, those people will just as soon kill him than work with him. And so it's going to have an interesting flavor to it, particularly in the back half. And by the same token, I think people know, they've certainly read it enough, that, when Nightwing says, we've got 14 Robins and 11 Batgirls and a Huntress, how come we can't find this guy? That I said to DC, this got to get fixed. Like, Batman is a solitary detective. That's how he works best. And Dick has proven himself as Nightwing and has his own book and his own life. Like, they're not hanging out anymore. That's like when you go to college and you graduate and you get a job. Yeah, you see your parents at Christmas time, but that doesn't mean you're calling them on the phone going, "Hey, I'm really sorry, but Blockbuster just got loose. Could you come over and give me some hands?" That doesn't mean that it can't happen. I just think that there needs to be a better understanding as to who gets access to the bad. And, we'll see how that plays out in the other books. Nothing would surprise me less. I always felt that the Riddler was smart enough to figure out who Batman was. So that was the piece in Hush 1. And I don't know, when I turned in the first draft and the Riddler was there, my editor called me and said, "Oh, he has amnesia and he doesn't remember any of that." And I went, "You mean they retconned that out of the story?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, he was faking it. That's what a smart guy would do. He would go, 'I don't remember anything. You can't, don't worry about it. And then when I need to, I'm going to come back and go, not only do I know that, I know who Dick is. I know who Babs is. I know who everybody is.' That's a much more interesting turn in the character than he got gold kryptonited so that he can't do that." And again, I'm not making fun of the guy that wrote that story. It was funny. I had breakfast the other morning with Tom King, who's really super nice guy and a great writer. And I was bitching about this story that it was fucking up my story. I'm sorry. I was bitching up that story.
You can swear. It's all right, buddy.
Okay. And it was messing up my story. And Tom looked at me and he said, I wrote that story. And I went, "Well, then you're going to have to help me fix it, because you gotta undo whatever it is that you do. 'Cause that's the only way I'm going to be able to sell it back to DC. Like, because they're very, very protective now of
Continuity.
Nope, if it happened, it happened. You can't just. And I so live in a world of maybe it didn't happen, and maybe I don't have to explain it. Like, there's no world in which the Riddler is going to say, "I had amnesia, I was faking it, and now I'm." Which brings me all of this is the story that I wanted to tell you when we started this is we find out that the way the planet got back into business when I took over Superman was that Bruce Wayne bought it back from Luthor and put everybody back to work. So I turn in the script. Bruce is walking. Lois says, "Bruce, what a surprise. What brings you here?" And he says, "I'm here to see Clark," which is absolutely accurate in what he was doing. When the book was published, the editor added what? The owner of the Daily Planet can't come by and look at his investment? And I every time I hit that page, I just want to cringe, because anyone who's reading the book 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later is going, "Bruce Wayne owns the Daily Planet? Why? For what purpose? What is that line doing in there?"
Sure.
So I have to continually still, when editorial, which has been actually pretty, I think having Jim Lee as your partner helps. They've been pretty good about making sure that I don't have to explain something, even if it doesn't match against. And also, look, there was no such thing as the internet when this thing came out. So everybody doesn't get to pile on, why is Batman asking everything as a question?
Yeah.
He would never ask everything as a question. And I just sit there and I go, just read the story.
I'm hip.
And by the way, if you don't read the story, you can't deny that Jim is drawing, and give credit where credit's due, Scott Williams inks and Alex Sinclair's brilliant colors. I just look at the pretty pictures.
Yeah, no shit.
Tear them off the wall, stick them up on your out of the book, stick them up on your wall, and you've got the best looking Batman book with all. And there are some great guys out there working on Batman. I'm not
Yeah.
It's Jim Lee, and so I'm gonna pump my partner anytime I can. It's just, and it's so much fun. I mean, it really is. The fact that it's the OG group, which is almost impossible to do when a book is 25 years old, to go back and go, okay, well, let's make sure we have the same inker, the same letterer, the same colorist. Like, who knows whether or not those people are alive, interested, aren't working on something else. I mean, the truth is, I was retired. Like, I didn't have any real interest in doing any of this until Jim said, I'm in, and I'm going to get everybody else to come in too. And so we jokingly refer to ourselves as sort of the Rolling Stones going out on tour in comics. And I think everyone goes, yeah, I think you're the only one who's old enough to actually understand that. Jim, and by the way, Jim and I are not that far apart in age, but they look at Jim and they go, Jim's like 50. You're 75 years old. And I'm like, neither of those things are true. But it's fine. It's whatever it is. And no, I do not think that we are the Rolling Stones. I just think that the Rolling Stones going out at 80 years old and putting as much of the band that's alive together and rocking that hard, that's what we're trying to do here.
That's excellent. No, I hear you, man. And also I appreciate where everybody is in the story. And as well, I don't know. I can appreciate your frustration. I hear it, but also it seems to work in your favor in terms of opportunity of giving us new conversations, not only with the people that were there for Hush One, but even Damien and his role in the story.
Well, again, it started with, well, now we got to use Jason.
Right. And I wanted to talk about Jason as well, of course.
Jason was not alive when we did the first story.
Fake out.
So
yeah.
I read all the Jason that I could. As it turns out, Ariana is Jason's editor, so I could have conversations with her about where he's going and what he's doing.
Sure.
And what he wants, which was, not exactly clear. And, I know that there are fanboys out there that, or readers, who felt like his alliance with Hush seemed unlikely and that he had made up with Batman. And I was like, yeah, maybe not so much. And that will play into what goes on. And again, when I originally did the first part, Hush One, Barbara Gordon was Oracle all the time. Right. And so I said at the very beginning to editorial, I said, look, we're going to use Batgirl because I never got to. And Bruno, who's the artist on Nightwing, just made her look so cool. And I thought, Jim, if you're okay with doing that version of Batgirl, that's what we're doing. So, that's why when she's in the clock tower, she's wearing her Batgirl costume. I didn't want to put her in a wheelchair and glasses or pretend or confuse people and think, is that Oracle or not Oracle? She has Oracle's abilities and Oracle's everything, but she's a badass Batgirl. Now, there's also another badass Batgirl, and there's fans of that are going, why don't you use her? And I'm like, because I'm using Barbara Gordon. I'm not saying there isn't another Batgirl. In fact, I said there were 11 Batgirls. So you can have fun with that all you want. But again, apple tree, Christmas ornaments, I'm trying to tell a story where people who really love, whether it's traditional Batman, whatever it is you want to call it, that's sort of the place where we're heading. That's the other thing that people have to understand. You've read 3 issues. And when you get to the end of issue 4, you're going to go, oh, this is not going to where I thought this was going to go. And when you get to the end of issue 5, you're going to go, okay, now my neck is twisted completely around. Where are Jeff and Jim taking us on this hush ride?
Excellent.
And then, in all fairness, you should just know that Matt and Jorge are starting a new story, and off they go. They're not going to be sitting around going, we barely escaped Hush. Now let's go get a new cave. Like, Matt's telling his story. And by the way, until they had some crossovers, there were literally hundreds of Batman comics and Detective Comics which made no comment on either story.
Agreed.
Silver St. Cloud was running around and having an amazing storyline and was not in the other book.
Yeah.
And guess what? He figured it out. But we figured it out that
Sure.
that Wolverine could be on the moon, be in Madripoor, be in the mansion, and be 100 years old, running around in an apocalyptic Earth.
I'm hip.
We got over it.
Hey.
And so enjoy the show.
I'm hip, man. No, we were Bob Haney guys back in the day with Brave and Bold. That made no sense to other continuity of Batman and Detective and the like.
And
so yeah.
And again, I think that's the other thing that James embraced in the Superman movie is that he just lands next to Guy Gardner, and Guy Gardner starts talking to him like they saw each other yesterday.
Yes.
And nobody's walking out of that movie going, well, when did they meet and how did that happen and why did he do that or any of they just, what, guys, they did. They came in, they had lunch, you weren't there that day. You want to see the receipts? Like, I can't help you. The issue is, does the story work? And that's the hope. And again, I've never defended a story. All I've ever done is defend the artist. And I've been lucky enough to work with people like Ed McGuinness and Tim Sale and Jim Lee and Mike Turner. And I'm not, if you go back and you look at where we brought Supergirl back into continuity.
Yes, Mike Turner.
And with Mike Turner, and she landed in a rocket in a big whole huge giant hunk of kryptonite. And didn't speak any English, just spoke Kryptonian. And there she was running around. We did not ever say this story took place before the death of Superman, after the death of Superman, 15 minutes ago, whatever it is. We just told a story that basically said, now we have Supergirl. And then that sold well enough that DC then said, do you want to launch a Supergirl book? Which then lasted like 100 issues or something like that. Yeah. And we sold a whole bunch of copies. And, and again, I will always say we sold a whole bunch of copies because Mike Turner did beautiful covers over Ian Churchill artwork.
Yeah.
That's as far as I can ever go. But it was fun. And that's all I'm ever going to do is tell comics that are fun.
I hear you, man. And I agree. I think your stories are timeless, and that's why they keep being reprinted. And Blue Superman, that's all you need to say. Electric Superman. And again, it was an interesting idea, but yeah, I mean, all of these are interesting ideas. I love Nick Spencer, and I loved Captain America: Hail Hydra, and the outrage that it caused. But it's like, don't worry, he's gonna come back. Everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah,
get fixed. Well, and again, you and I, we've been on the ride for many decades, and not to age us too badly, but and that's the thing. And you're right. I think sadly, internet and social media has given voice to these concerns of the moment, rather than enjoying what they're being given. And I
agree. And I also, I really appreciate. I don't get into any of that. That's not my world. But I think it's why the guys who do will often, when they do engage, will point out you're in the minority. Because at the end of the day, if you want that particular creative individual off a book, don't buy the book. And I say it every time someone comes and asks me for an autograph. I say the same thing because they come up and they say, thank you. This book got me into Batman. This book got me into Superman. This book got me into Spider-Man. I've been really lucky to work with incredibly talented, lovely people. But I say the same thing, which is, no, thank you. This is a partnership. If you didn't buy the book, you didn't hang in there, you didn't wait for the next Jeff Loeb something, then believe me, both Marvel and DC, more than happy to kick me down a flight of stairs. Like, there's a line of people that would go, you mean we don't have to deal with this guy ever again? Fabulous. That'll happen in a minute. And that's, a lot of the reasons why I left books was that my dad taught me, leave the party while it's roaring. Otherwise, you get stuck with cleaning up the mess. And I don't want to be on a book that sales are slumping and people are going, we're not interested in doing this anymore. We want a fresh new storyline. And they'll absolutely, I can tell you, as a guy who's been on the inside, they absolutely will look at stuff and go, then we got to make a change. And the thing I had to learn, which is really, really hard, because I know there's people out there with guns and arrows that are, still upset about Ultimatum, one of the highest selling books of the year, and beautiful artwork by Dave Finch. And Dave is a dear friend, and I almost feel like I always have to apologize to him because people love to make fun of that book. But that was the assignment. The assignment was, we're shutting down the Ultimate Universe. If you could do anything you wanted to do. And I said, it's not what I would want to do. I think it's what the villains would want to do. If they knew this was the end of time, then I think they're going to do some pretty hideous things. And so there still are a whole very vocal number of people that are out there that have a problem with what happened in that book. And that's when I learned that if you decide to kill Radioactive Man, even though you have a great story about it, even though you even have the daughter of Radioactive Man ready to come in 6 issues, you're destroying someone's life. That is absolutely unacceptable to them, and will not let go. The idea that there are people that are still upset that Sam Alexander exists in the Nova Corps.
Yes.
When I never said Rich Rider was dead. I never did anything about that.
Yes.
And I knew at some point they would bring back Rich Rider, and that what could be cooler than Rich Rider and Sam Alexander next to each other? But the assignment was, Rich Rider's been doing this for 10 years. He's what made that book great at the beginning, and I know there's Nova fans out right now that are beating their head against the wall going, you have no idea who Rich Rider is. Great, I don't. Fine, I admit it. But here's what I know. What was great about that book when it first hit was he didn't know what he was doing.
Yep.
It was the thrill of a young man learning to be a superhero. That's who Sam Alexander is. And the fact that people theorize that because his name is Sam, that I made him my son, and that it's a story about my son. No, I told a story about my son. The fact that DC published it was amazing to me. My son is in Superman continuity. It's right there. And it's one of my favorite stories.
Yeah.
But it was really a story about my dad. And it was the relationship that I had with my dad, who was not around, and I didn't understand why he wasn't around and how that formed me as I grew up. And if you go back and you read that with that in mind, and particularly when you find out that his dad is alive, that again, if I had stayed on that book longer, that everybody would have been reunited, and life would have been interesting and new and different. And there were lots of stories that we were going to do, but it was time to go. Um, and in that particular case, it was time to go because I had to go run Marvel Television.
Absolutely.
And I don't think a lot of people understood that when I agreed to run Marvel Television, the people at Marvel said, you can't also write comics at the same time. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, I'm in the television division. I'm not in the publishing division. And they said, we just want you to completely focus on TV. We don't want you also focused on. And I said, yeah, but I was on Smallville and Lost and Heroes. And during that time, on the weekends or at night, when I wasn't writing for those shows or I wasn't producing on those shows, I was writing at one point, and I was a much younger man. When I was on Heroes, I was writing 5 comics at once a month.
Wow.
I couldn't
Wow.
write 5 comics now if I was getting paid what I was getting paid to be on Heroes. But it it really it was just an interesting thing to suddenly disappear. But it was an interesting time because when I left, it wasn't that long after that Mark Millar left, that Brian Bendis left, that JMS left. And so the people that were sort of my compatriots, to pick a word,
Yeah.
left. Mark went off to make his own thing. Brian went to DC. We all were gone. And so all of those books had to have a new vision, a new thing. And we got Jonathan Hickman in the deal. Like there was no way for that strong a brain trust to suddenly give up these 8 or 10 books that they were done, so that people like, I don't know that I'm doing the right math, but I think Matt Fraction got a bigger piece of a voice. I think Ed Brubaker got a bigger voice because we all left.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that we held anybody back. It's just there were only so many seats, so many books, so many titles. And if we were on the A titles and we left, that somebody had to come in. And so they had to find their next Brian Michael Bendis and their next Mark Millar. And they did. And
Sure.
life survived. So I missed it, but it was so curious to me how I started to go to conventions, and now I was going to conventions as Marvel Television guy. And I would show up with the cast and I particularly the Shield cast, and because that was the first one out of the box.
Yes.
And now suddenly I was in an auditorium when we did Madison Square Garden, and there were 10,000 people to do Daredevil and to do the Defenders. Like, I was a guy that used to sit at a booth and sign, Challenges of the Unknown. Like, this was a whole different. And there were people that were coming up going, God, I love Daredevil. I love Jessica Jones. I love the Runaways. What you've been doing is so great. Really appreciate it. And then I would go, okay, great. I'm happy to sign your poster for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Are there any comics? And people would go, you write comics too? And I was like, I wasn't gone that long. I literally just left the building. But then when Last Halloween came out, and now particularly Hush, because I've now done a couple shows since Hush landed, amazing. Like, if you're old enough to remember what a record album is, like, it was as though we lifted the needle. I went off and did Marvel Television, and then we dropped it back down on the song, and people just bring comics to get signed, and some of them want to talk about Spider-Man Blue, but some of them just want to talk about what's happening in Hush, or what's happening in Last Halloween. I'm amazed by people who bring Last Halloween that haven't read Long Halloween. Like, I'm like, go read the original and then come back and we can have a talk about who all these people are. Where would I find that? Well, I happen to have one here, but like, it's amazing to me how cyclical your readership is, if you're lucky. And I consider myself to be really lucky.
Yeah.
That, yes, to answer your first question, why go back and do those stories? It really was, uh, in one case, because my partner had passed away. And then the other case, my partner called and said, I'm in, let's go. And I, for all intents and purposes, retired. So it was, I did 12 years at Marvel Television. I got to the end of the rainbow and said, I'll see you later, guys. I'm going to go enjoy my life now. And then, COVID happened and then nobody was working. And then all of a sudden, Timmy passed and another year went by and suddenly it was like, I could do this, if as long as I don't get caught up in now I'm doing 25 books, then I'm just going to blow my brains out. And then the only thing that sort of broke the mold, because I could see an end to the Last Halloween. I went, look, it's 10 issues, then I'm done. And it's the same thing with Hush. It was like, okay, it's 6, and then there's going to be a break, and then there's going to be 6. I can handle that. But I got a call. We're going to shift now back to the other team. I got a call from CB, the editor-in-chief at Marvel, and he said, what's it going to take to have you come back?
Wow.
And I was like, Siebes, I'm really honored, but you know me. And it's never about I want to tell a specific story. It's about what artists do you have? Who have you got that's not at DC or not at, or Mr. Kirkman hasn't tied up in a 22-year contract. And hey, Bob, and Robert. But and good for him, because I'm glad that there's an alternative for the artists that are out there. But there's, literally, I've been so lucky to work with so many great people that I just didn't have anybody that I was like looking at their roster going, wow, I'd love to. And that's not to take anything away. I like Pepe, who's on Spider-Man with Joe Kelly. I'm like, I'm not breaking that up. That's Joe Kelly's having the time of his life. I don't need to go in and root that up. If Ed McGuinness would stop drawing Spider-Man for 4 minutes and come and do something, I would do that in a heartbeat. And that's where we sort of started. I said, go get Ed, and then we can talk about what we're going to do. But if you know CB, he's got a card up his sleeve. He doesn't just call out of the blue. And he said to me, don't you have some unfinished business in the X-Men office? And I laughed and I said, CB, I appreciate you bringing that up, but all of those people don't work there anymore. I don't even know where they are. I don't even know if some of them are alive. Like, so whatever I would have wanted to do with the X-Men, it's gone. It's done. It's, Jonathan Hickman.
You mean characters or you mean artists?
No, I mean, my issue, the reason I left the X-Men office was editorial. It had nothing to do with. I was in a time of my life. I was working with Steve Scroce and Ian Churchill, and I found Adam Medina. Sorry, Adolmo. And I just thought X-Force was one of the best looking books out there on the market, and nobody had seen him before. And so he said, well, what was that about? And I said, I really don't want to get into this. Like, you're bringing up something that's 30 years old. He said, no, just tell me the story. And I said, okay, I I was lucky enough, really lucky, that when I started on cable, this is how they asked me. They said, "Hi, we read your Batman stories, and we think you're really interesting, and we have 3 questions." And I said, "Okay." And this was a young editor that was there at the time, who's not there anymore. And she said to me, "Do you like the X-Men?" I said, "It's the #1 book. Yes, it's great." She said, "Are you available if you were going to write the X-Men?" And I was like, "As available as I ever am." I mean, again, this is, I don't know, 20 years ago, more than that. I can't even tell. And then, and then she said, "And do you know what it's like to work in the X-Men office?" And I should have seen that as a red flag. I did not see it as a red flag. And in fact, thanks to Scott Lobdell, when I would go off on these tangents of like, I'm going to go up there and kill everybody, um, he would talk me in from the window and go, "Look, maybe we could do this instead of doing that." And that was because editorial in those days in that office had a very, very strong hand. So even if you had said to them, "X-Men and Cable are not going to meet until at least a year. I want to be able to do that." And they said to you, "Nope, first issue, Cable's going to be in the first issue." You had 2 choices. You could quit or you could try to make it work. And there were so many times where I just went, "I'm out. I don't need to. I have a full-time job." And, but when it got down to, I would write dialogue, and I loved writing Cable and Domino, and they had banter. They had the same kind of banter that I loved that Batman and Catwoman have. Nobody ever touched that. Everyone always said, "This is what Batman and Catwoman said." And so I would write banter, and it would go through. My editor would go, "That's great, that's terrific," and then uh, it would go to Richard Starkings, and he would letter it. And I don't think they understood that I was seeing it in the final form. That Rich and I were handing it off to each other beforehand to make sure that everything was groovy between the two of us. And that's why I always consider Richard to be my editor. And then the comic would come out, and there would be things that had been changed. And when I'm talking about changing, like Cable would ask a question and Domino would answer something completely. In other words, it was just stricken. So if there was a setup for a joke, it's sort of like, what time is it when an elephant sits on a fence? And then she would say Cincinnati. And I would go, that's not even dialogue. I don't even know what you've done, but this is not what we're going to do. So there's a lot of screaming and yelling and a lot of people going, "Was it me? Was it me? Was it me? Was it me?" So it only could be this one person who's not there any longer. And all of this I'm telling to CB. And he's going, "Well, none of those people here. What would you like to do?" I said, "Well, what I don't want to do is go on a monthly title. I'm not interested in that." I said, "Here's the thing. I came on at an extraordinarily lucky time. I came on 6 months before Age of Apocalypse. And cable sales were drooping, and they were interested in canceling the book. So they figured, we're going to give you this book and we're going to cancel it. And then, as it turned out, Age of Apocalypse came along. And again, it's hard for everybody to understand. You certainly remember it. They just announced that literally the number 1 through 8 hottest selling comics, because that list came out every month in Wizard magazine. Everyone was like, "What's the number 1? What's the number 2?" And they came out and they said, "We're canceling all those books." And there was no follow-up. They just sent out, maybe there was email in those days. I don't know. But if they said, however they can talk to the retailers, because that was the only way. It wasn't like all of a sudden every reader found out about it. The retailers found out about it.
Sure.
And they went, "Well, then what's going in its place?" And they said, "Well, you're going to find out in about 30 days. And, I got handed X-Man, and got to create that character and the origin and everything and have a good time with a teenage, not exactly a teenage Cable, but somebody that brought that youth and vitality to a guy who was seen at one time as war torn. And so we go and we do this, and it's a smash. Like the books are selling close to 1 million copies, which in those days was not impossible, but it was, there were books that were selling. I think X-Men was selling around 400,000 or 500,000, and it leapt to that. I can tell you that Cable was selling 200,000 copies, and the first issue of X-Men sold 800,000 copies, which if you did now, they would make a statue for you. So, and then 4 months later, it flipped back, and the readers didn't. Cyclops wasn't sticking around going, well, we barely escaped the Age of Apocalypse. Nobody remembered anything. And I went, so we have the highest selling story of all time for that period. Sorry, not of all time. Apologize. But for me, it was. I said, and it's a dream? Like, that's when you're making television and, Clark wakes up and he's Lex Luthor's brother, and the Kents are in jail, and Lionel is his father, and you're sitting at home going, wow, this is wild. How are they going to get out of this? And then suddenly at the end, Lana comes in and shakes him and goes, Clark, you've been asleep for 3 days. Oh my gosh. It was like the Wizard of Oz, except in the Wizard of Oz, you have to believe that she actually went to Oz. Like, otherwise, how did she wind up in bed? Like she got hit in the head, and then they found her somewhere out there, and the tornado clearly took her someplace. The house was back where it belonged. So I just said, I can't do a Wizard of Oz story. This is ridiculous. And that's, if you look at my Marvel career, that's why I'm only on the first 5 issues of X-Men. Like, it just got to the place where, because I don't think people understand, I'm not working on next month's issue now. If I was working on next month's issue now, it would be 3 months late. So I'm at issue 5 when the last issue of Age of Apocalypse is coming out, and editorial and I every day are like at war. And Scott Lobdell is calling me going, dude, you got to tone it down. Like, you're going to wind up getting the boot. And I was like, I don't care this is wrong. So I tell all this to CB, and he goes, well, what if you could end the story the way you wanted to end it? I said, but the way I want to end it has to affect continuity. It can't, I just can't tell another dream story that happens in a different story. It has to affect what's going on in the regular book. He said, I'll get back to you. So he puts me in touch with Tom Brevoort. Tom Brevoort, fortunately, is somebody that I've known and worked with and has been there longer than all of us put together. And he says to me, what's your end game? I said, this is what I want to have happen. And again, I have no problem if 3 months later, the Riddler has amnesia. I get it. New writer, new person, doesn't want to deal with this. I think this is an opportunity for us to make a significant change and to have the XOA exist. The XOA is the X-Men of Apocalypse, exist in what I guess people call the 616 world. Like, let's do that.
Interesting.
Let's see where this happens, so that let those people meet each other. I'm sure somewhere there's a Age of Apocalypse fan going, what are you talking about? Blink's been 100 times, and this guy's been here, and what do you got? If you didn't read X-Men Annual number 97, they met each other then. And I'm like, great, fine. I'll try to make sure that it sort of threads the loop, but I think it's a much better story if suddenly a whole bunch of different X-Men show up in our world.
Mm.
And that's what's going to happen come September.
Wow.
And to answer the question, which was, so they come back and they say, okay, we're going to do this. And I had to coordinate myself with what was happening with the X-Men writers. So I said, look, at some point, the Riddler doesn't have amnesia. That's the best way I can explain it.
Sure.
Um, and and you're going to get all these toys to play with and not play with or whatever. And I haven't written the end yet. So if you don't want any of these people, we can shove them back into Blink's little portal, and that'll be the end of that story. But just want to let you know that, like X-Man, there's going to be a shift. X-Man doesn't have a book now. He could. Who knows? He's certainly going to play a role in what's going on. Now I got to find an artist. And unfortunately, with the exception of the Cooper brothers, like most of the people from that period, i.e. Joe Mattiera, like are not working in comics anymore. Like that's not what's going to happen here, guys. Steve Epting,
Right.
not coming back to comics. Like the guys that were there when I was there are not working. Chris Pichello is not at Marvel. Like guys that I would fall over. And so we took a long swing at McGinnis. He's never an X-Men guy. He was always a Spider-Man guy or a Hulk guy. So I'm at all places. I'm at Lake Como, which I was lucky enough to be able to attend a couple times. And one of my dearest, sweetest friends is Simone Bianchi. And I love Simone and I love his work. And we had a great time doing Wolverine and Sabretooth. And I loved him chopping off Sabretooth's head. And I loved it being in Wolverine, Deadpool, the movie. And like, again, you can tell me that the movie came up with that, and I can say to you, yeah, but you can't get from A to B without A happening. And we chopped off his head. And I signed a lot of copies of that Greg Land cover where it's just him holding, it's an EC ripoff, where he's holding Sabretooth's head. So, and now I guess Sabretooth's dead. Like dead.
Yes.
And they want to stick with that. And I was like, great, guess what? There's a terrific version in the AOA universe that's got Wild Child on a chain. And that's when I bought in. When Scott Lobdell was explaining who the X-Men were, and he had a picture of Joe Mad's Sabretooth with a ponytail, and he's a good guy, but he's conflicted, and on a chain, he's got Wild Child, who's completely mindless and is just this beast that he carries around. I was like, this is so cool. And this should be in the regular comic. So, just having the opportunity to sort of make that happen. And so I'm talking to Simone Bianchi, who I'm not pitching for this. Like, even though we had done this, Simone takes a long time and rightfully so, because he's a painter and he's brilliant. But sitting across from him is a young man who is also named Simone. So it just makes it incredibly complicated when I tell the story, named Simone de Mea. And we like to refer to him as Big Simone and Little Simone. But he's just starting out. And he was on Batman and Robin. And I spent 3 days in Como, like just getting to know him and talk to him about what he wants to draw and how his thought process is, and because that's important to me. I don't want to give an artist a page who goes, I don't even know what you're asking for, or as I like to do to Timmy, Tim would go, look, you can give me anything, but don't give me cards. I can't draw cards. I don't want to draw cards. So every now and then I would just put a card in there just to drive him crazy. But you try to draw to an artist's strengths. Like Ed McGuinness draws big. Having little tiny quiet moments that Tim Sale does more brilliantly than anybody else, don't give that to Ed. It's not going to land. He can do it, but people aren't buying it for that. People are buying it because the Hulk is larger than anything else.
Yes.
He's bigger than the comic. He's coming out and punching you in the face. So, but I'm looking at Simone de Beauvoir's stuff, and it's exceptional, really is. And it turns out that he's a huge X-Men fan, and as it turns out, is a huge Joe Mattiera fan. And then he says to me that he knows Joe, and I'm thinking to myself, it's a small community. He knows Joe the way that I don't know, but, I can say I know. Actually, a lot of anybody I'd mentioned, I actually do know, but I just thought maybe they'd had a conversation.
Sure.
So when I pitched this back to Marvel, Marvel's like, we love that guy. He did one issue for us, and then he went off and he was under contract. And I said, I think his contract's ending, and I think this would be amazing if I could get him. And I said, and I want to take a shot at having Joe Mad do the covers. Joe hasn't done comics in a long time, I understand, but he is identified with Age of Apocalypse. So I called Joe, and we hadn't talked in literally years. And I call him and I go, listen, this is what I'm thinking about doing, and I really want you to draw these characters. And he goes, wait, so I can draw like Rogue with that short hair and Storm with that crazy haircut and that costume? And I said, yes, and Sabretooth and Wild Child running around with their chain and all that stuff, and Wolverine with one hand, and we're going to do all that. He goes, I'm in. Who's drawing the book? And I say, well, he's this new guy. I don't know whether I know him. And he cuts me off and goes, please don't tell me that it's Simone de May. And I go, is there a problem? He goes, yeah, he's like the best. He should not be doing comics. He should be working for me at my video company, designing things. I don't need you to make him into a superstar. I need him to dry up so that he'll come work for me. So I said, so let me get this straight. You are going to do these covers, but you're going to do them for Simone. You're not doing them for me or to revisit these characters or to go back to Marvel. He goes, absolutely. I'm doing these only for Simone. So life's weird how it works out. And I've seen the covers and they're amazing. And Arthur Adams has come in and agreed to do covers. And, it's Steve Gross. And then Simone's artwork is just mind blowing. And he's silly enough that he pencils, he inks, and he's also doing the coloring. So this book is just going to be pretty and fun, and it's the X-Men of Apocalypse.
So is that what's the title?
That's what it's called. The
X-Men of Apocalypse.
Yeah, and there's a 30-page alpha. This is exactly what we did the last time. There's a 30-page alpha, 4 regular issues, and then a 30-page mega, which then ties up the story. And then I go, okay, you guys, I gave you the toys, play with the toys, or don't play with the toys. The Riddler has amnesia. I have no control over that, but I can tell you that I didn't do the story so that you could put all the toys back in the box, because they were back in the box. But then, even so, I just saw that they just did this Marvel visits great moments in X-Men history, and there's a huge both Dark Phoenix and Age of Apocalypse, because they are tied in a weird way. So that's the beginning of my lead Marvel. But when people say to me, so how many books are you doing? Like, last Halloween is essentially done.
Okay.
So at this point, I have to finish Hush, and then I have to do this 6-part X-Men, and then have fun, guys. I'm going back to whatever else happens the day after tomorrow. I don't know. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Mentioning Ed McGuinness and both of you on Hulk, I can't believe, even despite Captain America Brave New World kind of stubbing its toe, that we're done with Red Hulk as far as the movies go, and certainly Doomsday is coming up and Secret Wars and things. Might
I
we?
don't I listen. I don't have any idea. I mean, certainly they didn't. I barely knew that he was in the movie.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay,
but I don't think you hire Harrison Ford at what had to have been a very high number, and not plan on using him again. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
sure,
And I don't think anybody had a problem with that movie in terms of the Red Hulk, except that
agreed.
people have come up to me and said I would have liked more than 6 minutes of the Red Hulk. Um, so yeah, I mean, if I'm Marvel and I'm figuring out what's on my plate in the next 5 years, there's a Red Hulk, Green Hulk movie in there somewhere. But I'm not at Marvel, and I'm not speaking for them.
I'm
That's
hooked.
me as a fanboy going. I'm hoping that there still is more, um, and we'll see what happens to that.
Well, and again, I'm thinking in terms of the likelihood that we'll see a comic book that might echo more Red Hulk, and that's why I mentioned you and Ed.
Again, Ed and I, we went in, we pitched, we said, how do we do this? And they came back and said, Ed schedule, Ed schedule, Ed schedule. And then at some point they came to me and said, I'm really sorry, but we've hired someone. I was like, well, I don't understand. They said, well, you made it very clearly that you would only do it with Ed, and we couldn't get Ed out. And I was like, okay, well, and then, they're doing these, I think they've announced it, if not, spoiler alert, they're doing these certain Marvel characters versus Godzilla. And so I know what a fan Ed is of that. And so I went to him and I said, look, can you get out of your Spider-Man and go and do this thing? And we tried to make it work. And I tried to explain to them that it was literally going to be like, out of 20 pages, at least 5 of them were going to be double page spreads. So, like, guys, this is not going to take Ed a million years. But that was as close as we got. I wanted to do in particular, now that on a, really just as an idea, and I don't know whose idea it was. It wasn't Jim's. They decided to do what they call the giant-sized Hush. So it's a Treasury edition. That's how I remember it.
Sure.
They're not the same shape as the Treasury editions. And all they are is 22 pages. There's no extra fill or anything like that. It's just sort of there. It's so amazing that it holds together. But I love them, and I think that they're super cool to look at, and also because you get to see Jim's art in the size that it was drawn. It's an 11 by 17 book. And I remember reading it up a long time ago and them saying, well, the retailers don't have any place to rack that, and so how are they going to do that? And I said, well, put it on the counter for all I care. I just think this would be cool. And so I had said to them, let me and Ed do a Red Hulk, Green Hulk, battle, Superman versus Muhammad Ali for the movie. And I said, but only as a treasure. It doesn't make any sense to me to do it. And I, that fell down the flight of stairs. So
Bummer.
it's not like, there's not a complaint department that I'm open to. But I can tell you that there are things that periodically come along that you try to make happen. And because I'm challenging in terms of what and who I want to work with, it doesn't happen very often. And please, if anyone who's listening to this thinks that I have some maniacal ego that's completely out of control, it's partially true, but it's mostly that I work best when I really understand the artist that I'm working with, and it's been a long time, and I think the only reason why I even entertained the idea of working with someone was that doing Last Halloween was working with 10 artists that I didn't know, and the excitement of seeing the quality of their work. There was never a page where I looked at it and went, I really wish that Tim had done this page. I do wish that Tim had done all the pages, but that's just being a friend.
Sure.
Um, uh, but I can tell you that the next issue that comes out, Becky's issue,
Becky Cloonan.
who is a Solomon Grundy issue, and I saved that story for her because nobody does haunted house better than she does, and so I certainly picked Bill Sienkiewicz is on the Joker issue because I wanted to see Bill Sienkiewicz draw the Joker, and everybody had sort of a reason for them to be there, and so far so good. I mean, there's just some beautiful work in there. So, again, shout out to Dave Stewart and to Starkings who give it the co-air and see what it does. And I love the book. I love the story, and I think it wraps up neat.
I love the variety of the artists, and I think everyone is really on their A game with it, and it's really been fun to see. And I am excited for these final 3 issues as well. I did want to ask you about Marvel television and really television in general when it comes to superheroes, because really, as you said, heroes. As we've discussed many times in the years, you were there for that whole. Oh my God, superheroes are fun, and I really think that as much as the early Marvel movies did their own thing on the big screen, Heroes really did kind of reintroduce the idea of, actually this can work on television. And then, of course, getting the opportunity with Marvel Television and those 12 years and all those great shows that were made for Hulu and Netflix and ABC. Yeah, I am curious. Isn't it interesting that Agent Carter, which had trouble finding its audience, I think endures. And I love when I see women still at cons still play her, and I loved that show, and it's a shame, those are first of all, let's talk ABC versus now what we can do with streaming, where you can watch it at your leisure, as opposed to, well, I'm sorry, it's at Sunday night at 7, you're going to have to watch it or miss it, and yeah, we'll have reruns, but those different things, you've been part of those changes in television. And I wonder, as someone that has been in the trenches, but now as an observer, yeah, what you think of where we are now, where we came from, if you have ideas of maybe where we're going.
Um, well, in the words of William Goldman, nobody knows anything. So I certainly don't have any sense of where they're going. I have nothing to do with Marvel Television.
Sure.
Nothing to do with DC television. It does make me smile that my friends Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio and John Bernthal and Devan Wall and rumor is Christian Ritter, that all those people are coming back to or even introduced to the MCU. When I spent years trying to get Kevin to understand that it was okay, that what we were doing was okay, and that we were not ruining people's opportunities to go to the movies, and that we were just simply expanding beyond it, and that I do think we at a certain point had too many shows, and I think that may have affected the quality of some of those shows. But I wasn't really in charge of that part any more so than I think people are recognizing now, because I think Kevin's being very open about it, that they were making too many movies, they were making too many television shows, that the engine ran really well on about 2.5 movies a year, like, so that you could sort of be working on your third movie and that would go into the next year. And that their decision to go back to that so that they could have time to focus on scripts and focus on not starting movies and making them as they were going along the way. I think they're embracing the look and the tenor and the actors of the Netflix shows, I think is terrific. Um, you know, I care for the actors that, when I read that there's a chance that Cloak and Dagger are going to be running around in Secret Wars, do I think that that's cool? Yes. Do I think that that show deserves to have more of an audience and that they really were onto something and that the Runaways characters were onto something? But, we were on Freeform. We were on a network that had, on a good day, 1 million viewers.
Sure.
And so, it was just really hard for the economics of it. It wasn't for anything else. And again, when we left Netflix and, everyone was pounding on the desk and saying it was, that we had failed in those books, in those shows, it had nothing to do with that. Those shows were doing just fine. Actually, those shows were really big number getters. Truth was that Disney wanted them back. And so they had to find a way of getting them back. So the first thing you had to do was stop making them so that when the price tag came from Netflix that said, if you want them back, this is what it's going to cost. And the fact that they bought them back and the fact that they put them on the air on Disney Plus, which is never going to happen, speaks to the quality of the show. That to me is as clean as can be. The fact that the Punisher is in that world is just like, what are you kidding me, guys? Like, you told us that we could do it all we wanted over at Netflix, but there was no way. And given the fact that all that stuff could have just been shuffled on to Hulu, particularly since they own 100% of Hulu now, is just curious to me, other than the fact that the Marvel box is on Disney Plus, and I think in the years since Disney Plus started, I think that at the highest levels of the company that they've looked at Netflix, which doesn't have an identity. There's like the other night, I wanted to watch Accountant 2 because I wanted to see John Bernthal, and I'm one of the few people that saw Accountant 1. So, and by the way, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed John.
Cool.
So I went to Netflix. That was my first look. And it really surprised me that it wasn't on there. And then I went, because it was an independent film. Like, people think of it as a Warner Brothers movie, but it's not, because it wasn't on Max. And then, the go-to is you go to Amazon, and Amazon has everything. So, by the way, you can watch Daredevil on Amazon if you want to, just to pay for it. So it's just, one of those weird things of how the business works now. Do I think that ABC is missing an opportunity by not having a superhero show? Yeah, I do. You're part of the Marvel family. Just go to the Marvel people and do that. But I don't know that that's Marvel's agenda. So, when I started the television division, they made it very clear that before you get to do anything, you need a show to be on ABC. So when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. hit, all of a sudden I got a phone call from Kevin who said, we want to do Agent Carter with you. And I went, fine, we can do whatever you want. I don't care. And then ABC was like, are you kidding? Another Marvel show? That's awesome. We'll be happy to. And we're in business with Kevin. Awesome. But it was hilarious when they would, I would say to them, okay, guys, this is our budget. And they would go, what do you mean that's your budget? And I go, that's our budget. That's how much we have to make the show for. They're like, no, that's our special effects budget. And I went, yeah, guys, TV, we're not doing that. And then they said, okay, well, how many days do we get? They said, you get 8. And then
eight to shoot one episode.
8 to shoot an episode, and then you get one more day to do pickups and to do second unit stuff, but you can't have your A team in those scenes because that's how you make your budget. The budget isn't about, like a lot of people think, in both in television and in movies, the number one thing that they spend money on, besides the cost of the actors, the number one thing that they spend money on is the number of days. Every day costs, let's pick a number, $400,000. So if you shoot 10 days, that's $4 million. If you shoot 9 days, you're at 3.6. If you shoot 8 days, you're at 3.2. That's your number. We don't care what you do during those 8 days. You can spend the entire time a close up of Agent Carter's face. Fantastic. Love it. Or you can have the Battle of the Bulge if you can do it in 8 days and at that amount of money. And
Wow.
the feature guys were just like, huh? And so I think that had more to do with the fact that there were no more Agent Carters than anything else. Was that, you know, the feature guys were going, this is, what are we making?
Sure.
For how much? And how many people are involved? And how much money are we making back? When we could take all of that time and make a movie and make $1 billion? Let's be in the $1 billion business. I mean, I was very proud that when I left after 14 shows, we made $1 billion. But it was 12 years and it was
Sure.
14 shows. We were in 5 different cities and we, you know, we were all over the place, but we made $1 billion. And I remember the people, some people at the movie department going, no, we do that with one. And I would go, look, I'm happy for you, but you have to understand something. Nobody makes $1 billion in television
That's right.
unless you're NCIS or you're Grey's Anatomy, you know.
And it still takes years. And it still takes years to do it.
And that takes 23 years to make that happen.
Sure.
You know, it's the story I love to tell, which is that, you know, Smallville, which was such a joy, amazing. In the second year, they made a deal where a certain number of countries agreed to prepay for every episode that they made. So there was the money from Warner Brothers Television, or the hell network we were on at the time, which was not enough to make the show. And then now there was new, fresh money that was coming in. This is before syndication, before DVD, before all the other things that they were counting on to make up the deficit. We now had $2.8 million. And that's a good looking show for $2.8 million.
Is that per year or is that
Per episode. Per episode.
Per episode. So that from the foreign money, $2.8 million.
No. That's total. That was the total money.
I see.
Okay?
I got you now. Okay.
What was foreign and what was that? I'm just telling you the budget was 2.8.
That's great.
And again, they would say to us, you got to make 22 of these. They cost 2.8. 2.8 times 22. When you get to the end of the rainbow, you're able to do that. And so part of the reason, I'm not taking anything away from how well that show did, because it always did well. But part of the reason was every single time they made an episode, they turned a profit. Why would you kill that show? On what planet? That's what NCIS, that's what Grey's Anatomy. When you look at those shows in their 22nd season, it's the economy that's making that happen. It's those shows are making so much money, and it's a much better idea than it is to create another medical show.
Right. And roll the dice.
And hope that works.
Sure.
Because for the first 7 seasons of that medical show, unless you're a boom out of the box kind of thing, you're losing money. But if it clicks and it works, and you're lucky enough to have a star that's willing to stick around, like you had with Mark Harmon, or you had with Ellen on Grey's, or any of the people that were on Smallville, all of whom said, you know, look, Lex left at season 8. Nobody remembers that. They think that he was there all the way to the very end. He wasn't. He left. You know, Lois didn't come in until season 4. Like it was Lana and Chloe. That was it.
Sure.
But that, and I give a lot of that credit to Al Goff and Miles Miller, that just they really understood this is what this show is. This is how much money we have to make the show. Let's make sure that that's what we do. And let's not, I say to people all the time, you watch the pilot of Magnum PI, you watch the last episode of Magnum PI, with the exception of the fact that they look older, same characters.
I'm hip.
Nobody learned anything. Every now and then, yes, you introduce a new guy who's the lab technician, and suddenly he's hunky or he's funny, and suddenly the writers are going, we should give him 2 more scenes. And then all of a sudden in season 13, he's a regular at the beginning of the show. If Erica Durance wasn't as wonderful as she is, both as a person as an actress, Lois could have come by and said, well, so that's Smallville. Thanks so much. Gone.
Never see her again. Yeah.
But she became a series regular.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
That's TV. But people that are sitting at home shouldn't ever have to think about these things. All they want to do is go, where's my favorite show?
I'm hip.
I don't understand. And they're lucky, that every now and then one of their favorite shows turns up on Netflix, and now all of a sudden everybody's watching that show. My brain, the Legal Show, not White Collar.
The Legal Show. Law and Order?
No, Law and Order is one of them. Law and Order came back to regular television. No, the show that was on TNT, that is Harvey Specter is the lead, and he's
Suits. Sure, Suits. I'm hip. Yeah, I love that show. Loved that show.
Look at Suits. It's a smash on Netflix.
Right.
So much so that the people at NBC went, let's do Suits LA.
And
go, yeah, guys, that's not. If you're going to do Suits, do Suits.
I'm hip. Yes.
But I'm glad to see Jamie Alexander thanking the world that Blindside is now. Is that what's called? Blindside?
Can't remember. That's part of the problem with network TV currently, but keep going.
No, but I mean, her show was a hit for 8 years or something, and now it's on Netflix, and people are watching the show like they've never seen the show.
I see.
And she's great, and the show's great, and now I feel terrible that I'm exactly sure that's the name of the show.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know it. Yeah, well, and that's leads to another question, Jeff. I really wonder what the future of scripted television is on the major networks, because, as you said, to create something new, you got to have the eyeballs. And truly, between COVID and the strikes and everything that has happened in the last 5 years, I think has done so much damage to the network product. And Netflix and the other streamers could always go to another producer and bring us something new and something different, and also something limited. But that model that you had with Smallville and S.H.I.E.L.D. and these other shows of 22 episodes a season and stuff, it seems like that's going away, and that they don't have much to replace it with as far as scripted television.
I think right now the problem is can you do it for price? And I think there are some people, certainly people I know, that could. And yeah, I'd be looking at my catalog. I'd be looking at Netflix going, well, if Suits works, if it's called Blindside, if that works, then go to those guys. Go and say to them, look, the fact that NCIS is still there, and then there's also an NCIS Origins and NCIS New Orleans, or
the franchises.
But anything could be a franchise. and you can take that chance and spin it out. I mean, look, the fact that Dick Wolf is still the most powerful man in television speaks volumes about A, that audience is there, and B, that the guy that knows how to make it is making it. And so, John Wells in The Pit, guy who's
Yes.
ER, here it is.
And West Wing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if he did West Wing, but
He did after Sorkin. He came in and was show running it. But
no,
yeah,
I mean, I'm talking about now. In other
I
words,
see what you're saying. Yes.
he's doing what a lot of people think is ER is The Pit.
That's true. Yes, you're right about that. Of course. But again, that's on HBO, and it's also 10 episodes a season, maybe 13. And isn't that interesting? That again, that 22 episode.
I think a lot of that has to do with cost.
Okay.
I mean, and the trick with Law and Order was that they always changed up the cast every 2-3 years.
Yes.
Mostly economic. I don't know that a lot of the guys that are older in that world, they made a lot of money. So do they want to go back to that character for whether it's 10 or 20 episodes and be stuck to a 7-year contract? Probably not. But do I think that's what the audience wants? Yeah. And if I ran the zoo, that's what I would do. It doesn't surprise me at all that Daredevil's working on Disney Plus. It does not surprise me. They have Charlie, they have Vincent, they have Deb, they have John. It's the same vision, it's the same music, it's the same look. It's just, and when I say to them, guys, it's season 4, like, who are you kidding? They'll say, nope, this is a brand new vision.
Season 1.
Great.
Yeah.
And, if that's what you need to do in order to get the job done, welcome to Marvel. But I don't think that, given what James has now created in the movie division, that you could then reboot Smallville. Do I think that there's a Smallville audience out there? Do I think that Tom and Michael and Erica, who are out doing conventions all the time, that they could come back and do an adult version of that show? Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. But I'm not sure that, the Superman show, which they just, with Tyler, that they just canceled.
Yeah, last year. Yeah.
I think that was to sort of, okay, we need to clean up.
Yeah.
What eventually became the Greg Berlanti shows. And also, Greg's not there anymore.
Right.
So, so who do you get, and how do you make that work, and all that other stuff. So, I think there are certain gold nuggets that are waiting to get revamped, and yes, there's a very vocal bunch of people who go, why do you make sequels? Why do you make remakes? Well, the problem is that, they make Elio as a movie and nobody goes, and they make Lilo and Stitch and everybody goes. It's hard. It's for everyone who's complaining, you did it to yourselves. You say you want something new, you say you want something that's bold and adventuresome and whatever the heck it is, and then you don't go, or you go, you know what, I'll watch it on Netflix when it's on Netflix, or
right.
Plus when it's on Plus. Well, that's how you wind up without new product.
Yeah.
You wind up with Incredibles 3, which makes you happy, but you can't then also say, why was Turning Red not in a movie theater? It was a great movie. It was a great movie. But I can't blame Disney for saying we're not putting this in a movie theater. And I'm glad there's going to be a Toy Story 5. Largely because, I think it's important that that cast reunite. Um, and but aside from you and me, John, nobody really cared about it. So it's
Well,
okay.
I honestly, Jeff, I wonder about this younger generation. And I don't mean I'm not yelling at clouds from my front porch or anything like that, but truly their brains are different. And I again, that's not a negative, but I wonder, and especially the proliferation of TikTok and this short content and attention spans. And yeah, and also, and I'm sure I wonder if you got this note when you were still active, but I keep hearing from my friends that are screenwriters that they're hearing from the studios, make the dialogue a little more deliberate because they're likely on their phone, they might be doing laundry, they're not giving you your full attention to watch the show. And to me, my God, it's like, oh my God, well, geez, you don't want them to have a good story? So your thoughts on that whole thing?
Look, I haven't run into it. I certainly know an awful lot of my friends that have run into that kind of thing. And again, someone will. Look, if I pitched to you 2 years ago that we're going to make a Superman movie that's a happy, bright, has an ending that's satisfying, that he's not going to scowl through the whole go. That's never. And James made it work. So, and what James has now done has opened up an entire universe. Now, does that mean that some executive sitting in the television division is going to go, how do we make more TV like this? Don't know.
Hmm.
We also have to see whether or not the movie does $1 billion. And I absolutely am. I am fatigued by the term superhero fatigue. Any more so, and I would say it all the time. More than one show. Aren't you afraid of superhero fatigue? And I would go, why? Is there medical drama fatigue?
Yes,
Is there cop show fatigue? Like we're a genre. We're a
exactly.
story. As long as they're well done and well written and well cast, the audience will come. I read I saw a little thing on a couple of Instagram. It was a conversation with a young Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis, and they were all partners in Planet Hollywood, so it'll date it into wherever it was, probably the 80s.
Sure.
And Stallone very eloquently says, all these questions that you're asking us about, are we just doing comedies? Are we doing action movies? All the action movie is the Western set in modern day. That's all it is.
Yep.
Good guys, bad guys, white hat, bad guy who wants something, white guy who's hat guy who's trying to stop him. That's it.
Yep.
And that's where we took it all. That's where it went to. Then I think the superhero genre sort of took that and said, okay, now we're going to have people that can fly, but they're going to have a sense of humor like they do in Die Hard, and they're going to and Commando, which I remember when we made Commando that people read the script and went, what is this? This guy's making jokes. And we were like, yeah. And then we'll no, but they don't make jokes. Like Stallone doesn't make jokes in Rambo. And I go, just try it. What's the worst that can happen? And there it was. Suddenly, now everyone was making jokes. And then, guys like Stallone and Schwarzenegger got to make full-fledged comedies. I mean, Twins is there's no
God, yeah.
action movie. It's a big hit movie.
Sure.
Bruce Willis became a movie star on top of being, a guy that could do very straight drama, but also would throw in a little zingers every now and then. Because you had Bruce Willis and you had that smile and that charm, and that's what you would do. But again, it's only new when someone tries it and it works, and then it's new. Like, you know, you cannot make the movie that James made without the Dick Donald. You can't. There's so many cousins going back and forth besides the music, but Lex Luthor's plan, which is to start a war and gain land out of it. I mean, that's what he wanted at the end. He wanted Lutherburg, and and when it turned up on the map, I just laughed. I just
Sure.
went, okay, I get it. I know what you're doing. But I've said for years, I probably have said on the show, I don't understand why that is the perfect Superman movie. Dick Donner showed you exactly how to make this movie. It has, and he took it in a very, very dangerous way. The movie starts, it is, for the first 20 minutes, it is a sci-fi, pure sci-fi film. Marlon Brando's in some kind of suit I've never seen before in my life, mumbling his way through the dialogue and picking up a paycheck. And then the movie changes completely and becomes this sort of Western Midwest drama with Glenn Ford giving the performance of his life. And I think Glenn Ford's a great actor. So he's there for
10 minutes.
10
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah. I say that all the time.
And then the movie comes out and it's a full-blown fucking comedy. Christopher Reeve is earnest through the whole thing. He doesn't make any jokes. He doesn't do anything like that. Lois has some funny lines to say, and Gene Hackman is bouncing off the walls and chewing up scenery, and he's got Ned Beatty acting like a complete moron, and Valerie Perrine, who at the time was the hot girl, and she's kind of a dimwit. And if someone sent me that script and said, wait, you're going to match all these tones together? And yet James looked at it and went, I'm taking that last act and I'm making it the whole movie. And the only thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to have Gene Hackman bouncing off the walls. I'm going to let Ned Holt, play this as dark as he's going to be Darth Vader. That's what he's going to be. And you're going to hate him. We'll see, but at the moment, it sure looks like it's working.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I can tell you that if Fantastic Four doesn't have that same tone, although certainly every trailer that they put out has that same tone, that they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And
do you really think so, Jeff, in terms of a lot of trouble? Because I always say, even when they really, really screw up, and thankfully, even Thunderbolts, which obviously underperformed from a box office standpoint, was at least in my opinion a great movie. And I'm always like, every studio that screws up with these big franchises, they're 2 years away from fixing the problem, because that's how long it'll take to make something new.
Maybe, but the problem is that when you make Black Widow, you make Shang-Chi, you make the Eternals, there's another one.
Well, Brave New World for that matter.
Brave New World, you make Thunderbolts, and all 5 of those movies underperform. That's a problem.
I'm with you.
You are missing the mark. And of course, you can ask anybody that I talked to who said, how would you fix it? I said, I would take a Brinks truck and I would pull up to Robert Downey Jr.'s house and go, whatever you do.
Jeff, I appreciate you saying that.
I'll give you the movie. Whatever. We'll make the movie for free.
Because
you are, at the end of the day, the heart of this franchise. And it's the only other people that I can look to that understood this is Barbara Broccoli and Kevin Broccoli on James Bond. They pick a Bond, and if the Bond didn't work, Tim Dalton, George Lazenby, goodbye. It's nice knowing you. We're going to find this part. Um, to go from Sean Connery to Roger Moore to Pierce Brosnan to Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
That's good shooting, Tex. Your franchise is strong enough that it can take a change. Robert Downey, there is no Robert Downey Jr. Nobody, and I think that if Paul Chadwick had lived,
Oh, I so agree. Yes.
that 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 Black Panther had a chance. The
Agreed.
fact that you lost Black Panther, you lost Robert Downey Jr., and you lost Chris Evans, and you thought maybe that Chris Hemsworth could carry the load. He couldn't. And I love Chris. I go see.
Sure.
The truth is, they have one guy who can carry the freight, and that's Tom Holland. And they don't own Tom Holland, and that's the problem. Tom Holland is the new Robert Downey Jr. That's
Interesting.
why when they make a Spider-Man movie, it does $1 billion.
Yes.
For Tom.
Yeah.
And so they can borrow Tom, but they can't build an entire The Avengers with Tom Holland.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So my only hope, and I have no idea, my only hope is that since supposedly, Doomsday, which is set up by, again, I admire the hell out of those guys because they made the Avengers before Captain America had ever come out. And if everyone said, we don't like Chris Evans, we want somebody else, well, then the Avengers was doomed. But they're taking a really big risk on bringing out the Fantastic Four before this Avengers Doomsday, and they play a major role. And so unless they come out and they're the new Avengers, you got a problem on your hands.
Interesting.
You don't have Chris Evans and you don't have Robert Downey Jr. And I can't get clarity as to whether or not Tom Holland's in that movie. I assume he's in Secret Wars.
Yeah, me too.
But if all that movie is Robert Downey Jr. running around as Doctor Doom, trying to kill the Fantastic Four, that's a big roll of the dice. And it's all about multi-planes and different guys playing different roles. Now, if there's a 10-minute Doctor Doom Iron Man fight in the middle of that movie, I'm there.
Sure.
And I don't care whether or not he's Iron Man from planet 336.
Well, yeah, that's what you can do with alternate universes. You can bring them all back. Yeah.
You can.
But
and the fact that Chris Evans has repeatedly said that he's not in these movies leads you to believe that he is. So
yeah, I think it's a line of garbage, but go ahead, keep going.
And so, okay, great. Bring them all back. But hopefully, they are smart enough that, and I think they have Marcus and McFeely writing them, or at least one of those guys, that you do have that, wait a minute, you're not my tone moment. That it's like, okay, I get it, but I don't get it. Like, that's the one thing that they were really great at, was sort of going, this doesn't work, it doesn't make any sense to me, and letting the audience go, great, doesn't work and doesn't make any sense to me either, and then just moving on. I think that's smart. I think if you just show up and Doctor Doom takes over the world and nobody, or Reed has 3 lines where he goes, we come from another dimension and now we've brought our problem into your world, that scares me. It scares me that we have to be in jeopardy. We can't go and fight, which is another thing that scares me about the Fantastic Four movie is, and I hope I'm wrong because I love the cast.
Sure.
I worked with Evan on Punisher, and I hope he's going to be a great thing. But the fact that it takes place in another universe and it's another planet, probably so that they can lose and then come to our world and go, we're here to make sure that we don't make the same mistake twice. That's a big pill.
I'm hip.
That's a thing that I just am like, really? You're going to lose so that we can win here? Like,
And to have to wait a year to see them redeem
yes,
themselves. Yes, I absolutely agree with you, Jeff.
that's
No,
a
I'm with you.
that's kind
I
of a,
I and forgive me because I don't mean to sound like somebody on Meet the Press that years ago you said, but I honestly, Jeff, for years I have dined on this conversation we had literally 15 years ago because back then I had asked you, and I don't expect you to remember, but I said, what happens when Robert Downey is in his 60s and these guys are older? I go, are we still going to buy him as Tony Stark? And at the time you said, I don't know, but isn't that a great problem for Marvel to have, given the amount of success they're enjoying now? And I absolutely understand that. But that is, I see Secret Wars and the alternate universes as an opportunity to bring in a different Captain America actor and a different Iron Man actor, possibly alongside the other guys. But
yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
I think that's what Thunderbolts was intended to do, which was to say, here's a terrifically written movie, produced, directed movie with characters, if you've been watching television, that you kind of know. And there's not a bad piece of casting there.
I
There's any of
completely
those
agree.
guys. And any one of those guys could have popped, could have suddenly become. I think a lot of people really like Sebastian Stan. I don't
Yes,
think they like him as much as
Chris.
Captain America.
Yeah,
I think if he had become Captain America, and and I'm not taking anything away from Anthony. Uh,
I I've
I
been saying the same thing, Jeff.
I think you have better chances at that franchise lasting. Um,
And also Anthony Mackie as Falcon is a great character.
yes,
And
absolutely.
that's why it's like I understood and I appreciated the limited series Falcon and Winter Soldier and everything it said, but by the same token it's like no, you really he should have stayed Falcon. And again, I really I love the actor and I love Sam Wilson as a character, but I really think everything they did because also he doesn't have the formula. I mean, I hate to get nerdy, but it's like he doesn't have the strength and it's like well, but his suit's vibranium and an adamantium shield, and I'm like, bullshit, man. I'm sorry. You need and even Sebastian's speech to him in Brave New World. Oh, you don't need that. Yeah, you do. I don't know how to break it to you, but yet again, I can't help it, man. That's
Yeah,
so
I don't. To me, it's much more about you know that Chris Evans has got that boyish charm,
yeah.
and
That's
Anthony
Steve
Mackie,
Rogers, man.
and Anthony Mackie, it has a different kind of charm, but he's
Completely
a
agree.
grown man. There is no ever denying that he's a grown man who has real issues that he's trying to deal with, which is what made Sam Wilson as the Falcon a great character.
And a contrast to what Steve Rogers is dealing
Okay.
with. Absolutely, man.
Now,
No, I'm with you.
now, would I roll the dice and bring in Glenn Powell in a heartbeat?
Yeah, yeah, he'd be a great cap.
You
Sure.
know, would I roll the dice and ask Tom Cruise to make 3 Iron Man movies? Absolutely. Um, but I wouldn't go to find someone at the level of Sebastian Stan and saying you're the new Iron Man. I think you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. I just
Yeah.
don't think you're going to make that happen. And you know, Gwyneth Paltrow is the female version of that. Not interested. They have to fix the Black Panther problem.
Yes,
It,
agreed.
and for me, it was, you take uh, sorry, brain,
Michael B. Jordan,
Michael B. Jordan.
Killmonger in the movie, obviously.
Yes, Killmonger in the movie dies in the movie.
Yes,
Okay, put him in the flower bed with the purple flowers. He comes out, and all of a sudden he's a nice guy.
I'm hip.
Next,
Yeah, yeah.
I believe Michael B. Jordan is the Black Panther in a heartbeat.
I felt the same way, Jeff. I really and it really to the point where it hurts to watch Wakanda Forever because it feels like the funeral that it is for
Yeah.
Chadwick, and it is a great loss. And I mean, he's our James Dean. He's the 21st century James Dean.
No, I completely agree. And it's just, it's one of those things where, you just want to
Yeah.
stop. And, but again, I'm not any smarter than Kevin Feige. I'm sure that these conversations were had, and for whatever reason. And look, Michael B. Jordan was, in many ways, Paul's protege, and I'm sure he looked at it and went, "I have no interest in doing that. I don't care whether or not you back the truck up. I have my own franchise in the Rocky franchise. I don't need to be the Black Panther, the third Black Panther
Yeah.
now." So they're going to have to roll the dice again. And maybe they'll get lucky.
Maybe Idris Elba will be an alternate universe Black Panther.
I mean, there's that version of that, and again, we can all sit here and go, they haven't been able to do it yet, and then you go, but they did get Mark Ruffalo.
Indeed.
And they did get that right.
Yes.
But the problem is nobody's standing around going, how do we get Eric Bana back? How do we get Ed Norton back? They were like, what are we going to do? This doesn't work. We need to find somebody for this role. Mark Ruffalo. Okay, now we're talking. Let's get going. Now we have a Hulk who can be on anytime. And what's great about him is that he doesn't want $30 million because he wants to make little independent films. So, but again, this is literally, we are now entered the age of just two fanboys talking.
Oh, sure. Yeah, come on, man.
Nothing to do. I mean, look, I said it before. You can show me Frank Capra, you can show me Steven Spielberg. None of them have the track record that Kevin Feige has. And when you have that kind of track record and you understand that franchise as well as you understand that franchise, then I have hope. But I can tell you right now, none of those movies interest me. Now, some of that may be because I was part of the family and now I'm not part of the family, and so I don't ever go back.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, Jeff. Is that like an old girlfriend, basically?
Yeah,
that
pretty much. I don't read like, if I've been on a comic and then I've left the comic, which is why, people ask me whether or not I followed all the continuity for Batman. I go, I don't need to. I didn't follow the continuity for Hush 1. So when I'm telling Hush 2, Alfred's not in it, so I'm acknowledging your continuity, but I'm also not spending any time thinking about where Alfred is. And if you don't think that Damian and Bane should ever speak to each other, well, I read that story and Damian spared his life. So something happened there.
Yep.
And so in the world that I live in, Bane owes it. And that's my explanation. You could like it, not like it, or how about this? Maybe you didn't read the issue that Bane is the one who's responsible for Alfred's death. How about you didn't know that Alfred was dead? Because you read Hush 1 and then you said, I'm out of here, thanks. And now you're back at Hush 2. Yeah. And I'm not saying that any of the writers that came, Tom King and Chip and everybody else that did all that fantastic work in between those two stories, awesome. Put them in omnibuses, buy them tomorrow at Amazon. But I don't want you to have to read all of that in order to understand what's going on in my book. I want you to be able to show up and go, Jim Lee. We didn't spend any time in Last Halloween. All we said was, on Halloween night, a holiday killer started killing a bunch of the crime family. That's it. That's what you need to know. If I got into the who's and the where's and the what's and how all that happened, and then there's a very sad story about how Two-Face was created and how one of my favorite characters got acid thrown in his face, Harvey Dent, and That's what you need to know. And yes, do I sometimes repeat that every 2 or 3 issues where I go, my friend Harvey Dent, my friend Jim Gordon? That's what I need to know.
My regret of Jason Todd and
Yes.
failing Jason, which I
Yeah.
think you handle quite well in Hush 2 as well.
I just went to a place where I don't. I, if you read that scene and you say that Jason forgave him because that's how they became okay. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that Bruce forgave himself.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so that's why they live the way that they live. But there may also be something really wrong with Jason, which is what I said the day that someone said that they threw him in the Lazarus pit. I went, that doesn't work that way. Like,
Doesn't work well.
beat in the head with a crowbar. Like, there's a consequence to these actions. Now, the fact that Ra's al Ghul, has brought himself back to life 100 times, I personally think that there's a cost to doing that. You don't just get to do that and not have something happen to your head.
When DeMatteis had Joker in the Lazarus pit, and he realized all the crimes he had committed and was horrified for those moments. I love that. That's the great the inconsistency of the Lazarus pit. You don't know where you're going to get,
No.
and that's the way it should be. Absolutely, man. I love that.
So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. No, good shit, dude. Absolutely. No, and also, by the way, I don't remember which issue, because again, I get advanced looks and stuff, and it might have been an issue that hasn't come out yet. The one that with Batman and Batgirl. It's I think next week or 2 weeks from now.
That's just before San Diego. It comes out the Wednesday of San Diego.
Oh, there you go. Well, there's a line, I'll keep it blank, but you'll know what I'm talking about, where you have a great callback to a great Frank Miller moment.
Yeah.
And that was great, man. That was great.
You're going to see a lot of year one. You're going to see a lot of
Sure.
Killing Joke. Like, I love monthly comics, and I love all the guys that work in monthly comics and the challenge of trying to come up with it.
Sure.
But if somebody's going to come up to my table and say, "What should I read?" I go, "You should read year one. You should read Daredevil Born Again. You should read
Dark Knight Returns.
You should read The Dark Knight Returns. You should read. Those are seminal works.
Yeah.
Those are things that
Determine what everybody was going to be doing for the next 30 years.
I'm with you.
Everybody was going one way, and Frank and Alan said, "We're going to go this way," and it stayed that way. Now, do I think that somebody's going to come along and do, a lighter, brighter? Yes, I do.
Sure.
I certainly think that Tom King's Batman and Scott Snyder's Batman are two very different characters.
Completely agree.
And are not my version of Batman.
Agreed with that as well.
I certainly lean more towards what Tom did than I do with what Scott did, but that doesn't take anything away from either one of them.
Nope.
But those are just two guys out of 50. Am I glad that Mark Waid is writing a Superman book? Yes, absolutely. Go knock yourself out.
And his World's Finest is great, as your Batman Superman was great. So
look, he loves that world. He loves the tone, and that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You don't put Dan Slott on Superman and not expect a light James Gunn version of this character. I'm sorry, that's what you're getting. And I've heard what Dan's plans are.
It's great.
All right in line with what's going on. And if I go see the movie and I've got a 5-year-old and the 5-year-old says to me, "What's a comic book?" Is it hard not to just put a little iPad in his hands and say, yes, it is. You actually have to go to a store. and let them see what it looks like to turn the pages and have a tactile relationship with the comic book. But it's no secret that the modern audience for comic books is 40 to 60. It's aging out. So they got to find a way of being able to read it on your phone or turn it into manga, or every now and then you have Hush 2, which I'm sorry, you don't get 400,000 ordered because the retailers are looking to sit with 600 copies in there. They're expecting that people are going to come into the store that haven't been in the store.
Yeah.
Or stopped and came back. Like,
yep.
That's, people question what I'm doing as that it's nostalgia. And I've always believed that nostalgia is a love of something that never actually happened. That you created it in your head. And
sure.
That you are aching for that. And, it's the carousel story in Mad Men that Don Draper delivers. But, at the end of the day, just try and tell a good story. And I'm hoping that you enjoy it, not just because you enjoy the characters, but because the artwork is amazing. And that it's the only kind of genre, it's the only kind of storytelling that so integrates the reader, the viewer. You have to think of what Batman's voice sounds like. You have to think of what Lois Lane's voice sounds like. Now, you may want to put in the voices from the movie. Good for you. Great. But if so far, I suppose that you can call Zoe Kravitz Catwoman, but I don't know what Catwoman's voice is if I'm reading Batman. Just reading Batman. And I don't know whether or not it's Rob Pattinson that's in your head, or Christian Bale that's in your head, or Michael Keaton. What I'm pretty sure is that Ben Affleck's not in your head. But he might be. I don't know. My character isn't acting like that, so I'm just hoping that you're enjoying the show. That's really what my job is: tell a story that people can read and enjoy the adventure of what you're doing, and also that, much like storyboards, the artist is talented enough to let you go from a picture of a gun and a sound effect that says bang, and then the next picture is a guy falling down. That in your head, you connected those two pictures. Those pictures are not connected. There's no wide shot of somebody pulling the gun and the guy on the other end falling down. It is two separate images that your brain is filling in the space. There's animation, live action, television, movies, fill in all the spaces. Have to. So somebody tells a story that doesn't. And then they'll go, oh, this is a new way of being able to do that. I love the fact that Superman starts with him falling out of the sky and landing in the Arctic.
Yes.
And you never get to see that fight, or how he flew all the way up there, or that he happened to land 100 yards from his. He flew from Metropolis to Antarctica. They decided to move to Antarctica instead of the North Pole.
Right.
But it just starts, and you'll fill in the blank.
I agree.
And the idea that he's the hammer of Bolivia or whatever.
Yeah, no, nosebleedia. Yeah.
Exactly. And when he takes off his mask, he's got another mask,
And then when he takes off his mask, he's got another mask. And then he gets thrown into a black hole, and everyone thinks he's going to come back as another guy. That's comics.
I'm hip.
That's comics at its best. It's
Yeah.
like, I love when people take their masks off and there's a mask on underneath it. To me, that's like, if you did that in a drama, people would go, wait, he's got a mask on under the mask? For what? Who's he hiding from? And never explained. There's no moment where Luthor goes, I've kept his identity a hidden secret from you.
Wow.
Because I just don't, then Superman would have just looked under the mask with his X-ray vision, which I think he has. There's a moment where he uses it, I think.
Can't remember.
Well, there is an X-ray part, but I think that's when they're trying to get the nanites out of his lungs.
Yes. How about I like the idea that his glasses give people the illusion that
But you know that's straight out of the comics. I think Elliott Magan wrote that.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow. Because I loved when Christopher Reeve did the physical thing.
Yes.
That's amazing. But go ahead.
When I saw it in the comics, because that I remember reading the comics. That's how old I am. And him explaining that he had these, I mean, I forget who he was explaining it to, because it's like whoever it was had to have known. And it was, but it was that he had hypnovision. So that when you looked at him and he made eye contact, he was basically making you see something else.
Sure.
And I remember thinking to myself, why do you explain it? Like, to what point? But I thought the way they handled it, which was for Guy Gardner to say it so that Superman didn't, and then for Guy Gardner 2 minutes later to go, so then he's Clark Kent. Like, okay, well, that's the biggest secret in the world, just given up to her. I just thought it was great. Casual. And how do you do it? And, I mean, look, in the first 5 minutes of the movie, you know that Rachel knows. So, you're on board. Do I want to know that scene? Sure. Am I ever going to see that scene? Like, gosh, I hope that James goes forward and that I don't need to see the moment where they
explain it.
Decided to explain it. That's where it goes. I will ask you this question. This is the one question I'm going to always ask.
Talk to me.
Lex throws it away. It's actually on his back. So I'm assuming it was something that they put in. He says, yes, I cloned you. You have no idea how hard it was to get a strand of your hair. And I sat in the theater going, actually, that would be very hard. I don't know how you got a strand of his hair. That's not, you just jumped over that particular bale of problems.
Interesting.
I've written and I've seen 73 comic books where someone tried to cut his hair. And unless he used his heat vision, cut his own hair, and left those strands around somewhere, which is a possibility.
Sure.
Don't know how Lex got that.
Interesting.
And the fact that I'm sitting here 5 days later still trying to figure that out, not a big problem.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I texted Wade. I'm like, thank God, a great movie. Because I had minor quibbles, and that's all he told me. But he goes, no, it was great, and that's how I felt. And in my mind, I really can't even list them. I gave it 5 out of 5. I think it's an excellent movie. I'm relieved, and it's obviously based on this first weekend. Although my good friend Rob Burnett last night, I was on his show, and he said, well, we'll see, because the first weekends are great. But I do think this will have legs, and I think this is going to be.
I think the big difference between this and First Weekends Are Great is the cinema score is A-, meaning that people are coming out of the theater feeling very.
Yes, agreed.
And B, I think people are. I don't think reviews get people to go to the movies. I do think that bad reviews keep people from going to the movies. So you can get great reviews, and I don't know that it helps your box office. I think that if 90% of the people said garbage, that most people would go, you know what? I heard it was garbage, so I'm not going until it's on stream. So there's that side of it. And then they got kind of a clean runway until
Fantastic Four.
2004.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel the way I do, which is the last Marvel movie I went to that I liked was The Avengers. So I just went to go see Superman. I don't know that I need to see the Fantastic Four.
I hear you.
Need to see Superman. They created an ad campaign that basically said, "This is all new, all different. You should come see this movie." And in all fairness, 100% is the dog.
God, I love that dog. Absolutely.
And I just don't think that you're a human being and don't love a dog.
Yeah, yeah.
And no one's ever seen a super dog. It's not like it's ever been done before.
Nope.
You can put one thing in a movie that is something that no one has ever seen before. All you need is for that friend of yours or that girlfriend of yours or that daughter of yours or that cousin of yours to go, "There, the dog's cool. Oh, we should go. Okay, well, let's go. Let's go see the dog."
Yeah.
And the dog's in a lot of the movie. He's not like, he doesn't have like 2 scenes.
No, the dog's great.
And so, and for my daughter, they don't kill the dog.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God.
In fact, the one time that Crypto sort of gets hurt, you very quickly find out, oh no, he's just facing cosmic spoils. But needs to be rescued and gets rescued. So
yes.
Okay.
How about Supergirl, Jeff? What'd you think of our tease that we got? Given that that's the next movie,
I thought it was the best way to do a post-credit sequence. I thought it was kind of a great way to end the movie and have her come in and have, what is she, 30 seconds? And she's in the costume. Oh, it's her dog? Oh, she likes to go get drunk? That's definitely not this movie. And I've read Woman of Tomorrow. And,
Tom's Story. Great.
And so I know what the movie's going to be about.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, of course.
I think people are in for a big surprise.
I agree with that.
But again, I loved the fact that she comes crashing through a wall and goes, "Who moved the door?" That's an entrance. That's like, okay, I get it. Because I had heard she was in the movie, that she was doing a cameo, and all I could think of was, I don't want to see the rocket. I don't want to see them trying to get to know each other. I don't want any of that. I just want her to suit up and punch some guy and have Superman go, "Glad you're here, cuz." That was what I was ready for. I was not ready for, "Hi, I'm here to pick up my dog." And then bolt out of here. And the fact that movie comes out next year.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm waiting 4 years to find out when that's going to be.
Exactly. Agreed.
So, yeah, no, I think James has a high-class problem, which is, what do I do?
I'm with you, man. Yeah.
Here's the good news. In many ways, Guardians 2 is a better movie than Guardians 1.
I love Guardians 2. I hear you. I mean, I loved them both, and I think obviously needed 2 to follow 1. But I think it's a heart story. It's a father-son story. And sadly, learning that the imaginary dad that you had in your head isn't the guy you wanted him to be.
And I think that's, at the end of the day, one of James's many strengths. But he says he's writing a script. The rumor is he's writing World's Finest. But don't know you can do that movie without introducing Batman into your world. And it's not going to be Rob Patterson, and it's not going to be a connection to Batman 2.
Right.
if you're doing another movie beforehand,
Yeah, like Batman and Robin, which we had heard about
Batman and Robin,
potentially.
what they've been talking about. Well, I don't know what he's doing. I mean, for all I know, he's writing Superman 2. I mean, if I were him, that's what I'd be doing. But you know, obviously, all of this is going to lead to some version of the Justice League. And, you know, if he gets that right, then he's home. That's it.
That was my other concern. Get with the trailers is he putting too much in that way, in a different way that they did in Batman versus Superman with Snyder and everything. But yeah, I'm like, it's a Superman movie, man. You don't need all this. But obviously, I understand he's setting up a new universe, and I honestly think all three of them had, and even Metamorpho for that matter, they had interesting things to do, and we learned about them.
And for me, it worked.
Agreed.
I never would have taken that challenge, ever. But he had a really, really big responsibility, which was, I have to show you what this universe looks like. I'm going to create it all in one movie around one character who everyone thinks I can't do. They don't think I can do the main character, much less the whole thing. And while I'm running the studio, I'm going to produce the movie, I'm going to write the movie, and I'm going to direct it. Like, those are giant cojones. And,
I'm hip.
And it works.
Yeah.
That's the thing that is kind of amazing. And I don't know anybody else that's ever done that. Yeah, we can point to Favreau and Robert Downey Jr., but at the end of the day, it's one guy in one world. And yes, they did set a tone as to what that world was going to be, but they certainly weren't. Nobody else got introduced, except Sam Jackson coming on at the very end, going, "You're messing with the Avengers Initiative," which, again, to me goes, so there are all these other guys running around that you seem to know about, Nick, and you're going to put them together in the Avengers, but I didn't see any of that. And when you're flying around like Iron Man, everyone's like, what the hell is that? And from what I understand, it was an afterthought. This movie was well thought. Like,
yeah, there's a plan.
How are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And how are we going to do this with three characters nobody knows? Four, if you count Metamorpho.
Sure.
You're just sitting there going, really? Hawk Girl? That's what you decided? Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner. Besides my buddy Kevin McGuire, who knows what is happening? And yet, I don't think people mind it.
I so agree with you, man. Yeah.
And again, I go back to that speech that James made that night, which is, I just picked up a comic book and I was in it. I was in the world. And that's what he said. Come along, I'm going to tell you a story. And there's going to be some times when you're going to turn to your spouse or your partner or your kid, and you're going to go, oh, that is. And there's going to be somebody that's your friend of your friend who goes, okay, I'll tell you who Metamorpho is. There you go.
Yeah.
But huge, giant risk.
I so agree.
We'll see.
I hear you,
buddy.
Yeah, well, no, we're wrapping. We're good. No, we reached the end. It's good. No, we brought it back.
I just, I want to thank everybody for listening. This will probably be in 7 parts. This has been a product of Stinky Productions.
Stinky Productions.
And as you know, John, looking trim, fit, ready to go out, take over the world. And Jeff Loeb, aging, telling stories he shouldn't be telling. But hopefully you'll stick around for parts 1, 2, and 3 that will be on. I don't know. You can find this on YouTube and Instagram, and you can just look up Word Balloon on Google or Gemini or Chat GBT and go, what's Word Balloon? And they will bring you to the Loeb Report. This is Jeff Loeb signing off, and I hope you guys had a good time. This was hours of conversation.
Thank you, Jeff Loeb.
Take care, John.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Become a patron today. Patreon.com/wordballoon. For as little as $3 a month, you can really help Word Balloon keep going and get exclusive content you won't find anywhere else. Here's what you get. The Word Balloon Magazine, a digital publication packed with behind-the-scenes interviews, commentary, and insights from your favorite comic book creators, writers, and pop culture stars. And you can join the Word Balloon Book Club. Join Brian Bendis and me for a live monthly discussion of a hand-picked graphic novel. It's a great way to dig deeper into storytelling, art, and comic book history. Word Balloon has been a home for creator conversations since 2005. Your support helps cover production costs and keeps these interviews going strong. So if you love comics, creators, and long-form conversations, become a patron today. Be one of the League of Word Balloon listeners. Patreon.com/wordballoon.